John Donovan. Here. Michael Hurley.
Here.
Jay Lipp.
Here.
Gaylord Meyer. Here. Eric Sunman. Here. Pete Ambrose.
Here.
Catherine Burstein. Here. Nathaniel Schindler.
Here.
Jeff Steele.
Here.
Keith Varian. Ed Bateson.
Here.
Laura Devlin.
Here.
Hank Ferentz.
Here.
Dave McKenzie.
Here.
Mary McCullough.
Here.
Heather Dean. Joe DiMartino.
Here.
Bill Gerber.
Here.
Joe Palmer.
Here.
Cindy Waldron. Josh Garskoff. Lauren O'Brien. Andrew Semmel. Ruth Smay. Carol Way. Julie Gottlieb. Alan Marks. Sheila Marmion. Jay Wolk. Liz Zezima. Jen Hochberg. Kevin Hopkins. Eric Newman. Phil Pierce. Hal Schwartz. Kathy Braun. Alex Durrell. Jason Lee. Tom McCarthy. Jeff Milrano. Pam Iacono. Ellen Jacob. Lori McArdle. Carol Pontrelli. Chris Timniak. Brian Caffarelli. Brian Farnan. Ray Newberger. Bill Perugini. Bruce Ryan.
Could I ask that every member of the audience please stand and face the flag for a Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I ask that you remain standing, and I ask that you remain standing and keep in your thoughts and prayers the Newman family. Noel Newman, a former town attorney and a former member of this body, passed away recently. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Schwartz. Representative Bateson.
Yes, Madam Moderator, Ed Bateson, District 3. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules specific to Rule 26, which is the holding of party caucuses.
Second, Representative Schwartz. Again, members of the body, this requires a 2/3 vote to approve the suspension of this rule of the rules to regulate. All in, let's call a roll.
John Donovan.
Yes.
Michael Hurley.
Yes.
Jay Lipp.
Yes.
Gaylord Meyer. Eric Sunman. Pete Ambrose. Catherine Burstein. Nathaniel Schindler. Jeff Steele.
Yes.
Ed Bateson. Laura Devlin. Hank Ferentz. Dave McKenzie. Mary McCullough.
Yes.
Heather Dean. Joe DiMartino. Bill Gerber. Joe Palmer. Cindy Waldron. Josh Garskoff.
Certainly, we are voting on item number, a motion to in our rules to regulate, item number 26. During any meeting, the majority and minority leader may each call for one 10-minute recess without the need for a vote for the purpose of holding a political caucus. Voting yes to this would suspend that rule and allow each caucus to call as many caucuses as they need.
Lauren O'Brien. Andrew Semmel. Ruth May. Carol Way. Julie Gottlieb. Alan Marks. Sheila Marmion. Jay Wolk. Liz Zezima. Jen Hochberg. Kevin Hopkins.
Yes, Representative Steele.
By making this motion, you unfortunately revert back to
you want-
no policies.
Do you want to step to the microphone?
I would just suggest if you make this motion that you make the motion to suspend the rules and allow for essentially unlimited caucuses or a certain number of caucuses. Otherwise, we go back to default, which is no caucuses.
I will accept that as a friendly amendment to the motion.
Mr. Steele?
So I propose an amendment that we suspend the rules and allow for unlimited caucuses.
Seconded by Representative Schwartz. We'll start the roll. Go ahead.
John Donovan? Yes. Michael Hurley? Yes. Jay Lipp? Yes. Gaylord Meyer? Yes. Eric Sundman? Yes. Pete Ambrose? Yes. Catherine Bernstein? Yes. Nathaniel Schindler? Yes. Jeff Steele? Yes. Ed Davidson? Yes. Laura Devlin? Yes. Hank Barons? Yes. Dave McKenzie? Yes. Mary McCullough?
Yes.
Heather Dean? Yes. Joe DiMartino? Yes. Bill Gerber? Yes. Joe Palmer? Yes. Waldron? Yes. Josh Garsbaugh? Yes. Lauren O'Brien? Yes. Andrew Semmel? Chris May? Yes. Carol Way? Yes. Julie Gottlieb? Yes. Alan Marks? Yes. Sheila Marmion? Yes. Jay Wolf? Yes. Liz Nezema? Yes. Jen Hopper? Yes. Kevin Hopkins? Yes. Eric Newman? Yes. Bill Pierce? Yes. Al Schwartz? Yes. Kathy Vaughn? Yes. Alex Giroux? Yes. Jason Lee? Yes. Tom McCarthy? Yes. Jeff Delareno? Yes. Pamela Iacono? Ellen Jacob? Yes. Maura McCardle? Yes. Carol Contrelli? Yes. Ryan Caparelli? Yes. Brian Farnan? Yes. Ray Newberger? Yes. Bill Perugini? Yes. Bruce Ryan?
Yes.
The motion passes. On to item number 2 on the call, to consider and act upon the proposed appropriations in the amount of $286,015,872 for the fiscal year of July 1, 2014 through June 30th, 2015, as recommended by the Board of Finance for any lawful purpose. The total proposed budget as approved by the Board of Finance is and as follows. Board of Finance recommended budget of $286,015,872, less non-current tax year revenue of $25,423,521, net revenue to be raised by current year taxation of $260,592,351, plus senior tax relief of $4,255,002, plus reserve for uncollected taxes or other credits estimated at $4,420,423, and the gross amount to be raised by taxation is estimated as $269,267,776. Representative Schwartz? Motion to discuss. Representative Schwartz, seconded by Representative Ferentz. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. House Schwartz, District 7. I want to welcome everybody to the 2014 Fairfield budget, hopefully night and not multiple nights. I just wanted to discuss the budget a little bit. The discussion of the budget that we have before us, of a sound, reasonable budget that has been presented to us by a bipartisan group of people who were elected for that purpose. Our boards of selectmen and board of finance were elected just for that purpose, to get this budget in order to present to us. They did a yeoman's job with tremendous amount of work, and I'd like to thank the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance for the work that they did over the last probably 4 months to get this budget to us and to this point. And I would like to say that I'm very proud to support this budget as it stands right now with no additional reductions. Thank you.
Representative Palmer.
Deep breath, everyone. Can you hear me? Joe Palmer, District 4. Thanks to everyone who has been involved in the long budget process this year, including the many residents who shared with us in emails, private conversation, and public comment what they believe would be best for the town. Members of the Republican caucus will be making proposals tonight to further reduce the budget. If all are approved, it will bring the tax increase to below 2% for the first time in 5 years, or to 1.95%. Many of you might not be satisfied with our efforts tonight. Some of you might think we went too far, while others prefer us to have gone further. But we believe that this is a significant yet reasonable proposal that continues the progress made by the first selectman and the other town bodies to deliver Fairfielders a lower and more affordable tax increase. We also expect strongly that these reductions, while substantial, will have little noticeable impact on services and quality of life here. Our job as members of this body is to exercise our judgment regarding what is in the best for the long-term interests of this town. And my judgment has been informed by many considerations, most important of which are, before 2008 and the Great Recession, growth in both property values and incomes were quite strong, and increases in property taxes were manageable for most of our residents. In recent years, our fortunes changed. Incomes have been flat to down, along with property values. Unfortunately, the town's budget hasn't cooperated and has continued to grow at a rapid rate. This is not from the addition of extravagant new services, but mostly because of increases in contractual obligations, which are out of control of our control year over year, and which are difficult to change significantly from contract to contract. The tax burden has grown accordingly and beyond many of our residents' ability to pay, forcing many to leave their homes. And yes, it is true, as many have said in public comments, which I find very exciting, that Fairfield remains very attractive for families with children from other communities. In fact, depending on where you come from, they might even find Fairfield a bargain, especially considering our fine schools and our high quality of life. This also explains why our school enrollment has increased over the last 10 years, when many other Connecticut towns have experienced declining enrollment. My wife and I have 21 members of our immediate family in town, a few of which are in the audience right now. I'm sure I have a couple cousins in here too. I'm excited to know that people are coming to our community from all over, investing in their homes, businesses, and looking to grow roots here, along with my family, because I'm not going anywhere. However, while we attract families, it is essential that we also maintain a healthy balance between residents who have children in the schools and those who do not. To maintain that healthy balance, I believe it is essential to maintain a low, consistent rate of increase in our tax rate, since unfortunately, because we can't expect short-term growth in our grand list until economic conditions improve. This means that we must carefully control spending. In recent years, there's been serious effort to control spending, and this year was no different. But it hasn't been easy because of high costs of our contractual obligations, particularly pension, health care, benefits for our employees, the costs of which are unpredictable and have been increasing faster than the rate of inflation. Like many other towns, including, I'm sorry to say, actually many other towns and states like Connecticut, we could ignore these future costs and kick the can down the road. But I'm in favor of fully funding our annual pension, our OPEB obligations, of putting money aside for our labor contracts currently under negotiation, and adding $500,000 to our rainy day fund, or which is aka the general surplus. These are all important and fiscally responsible investments in our town's ability to continue to prosper in the future. However, they also impose constraints on our ability to spend on current services. We simply can't do it all. So until we can get these volatile costs under control, we can't just hope for the best. It is essential that for each body to look to trim the budget back as much as possible so taxpayers can more easily avoid them in the future. This is our path to moving beyond these contentious budgets we have each year that people have grown so tired of. We applaud the first selectman and other boards who have already made difficult decisions to reduce this budget, and we agree with the rationale they used, which they consistently said was to deliver residents a lower tax rate. What our members are going to propose tonight is not meant to be a critique of their work. It's just that we believe it's important to go a little further. We think this will send an important message to residents that all town bodies are taking action to slow the growth of spending to lower percentages in each of the past 2 years. We believe this will build confidence in taxpayers that we are on the right track so they can continue to stay here through these challenging times. It will also make it even more of an attractive and affordable alternative for those who want to come here to raise a family. Lastly, we also think it will be a positive message that our proposal, if approved, demonstrates that several departments in the town made sacrifices to make this happen. So I'd like to make the first motion this evening to reduce the Board of Education by $500,000. The superintendent's ability to slow the growth of spending in town has to be acknowledged. In the decade before he arrived, the district had an average budget increase of roughly 7%. Dr. Title has brought that average down to a little over 2% in the last 4 budgets by implementing zero-based budgeting and several other various cost-saving measures that save the town millions. I believe he's an asset to the town, and we were fortunate to have him. In a time when the town needed to reduce costs, he delivered. But too much volatility remains in the Board of Ed budget. Many of you recall last year that the Board of Ed itself was contemplating up to $2 million in cuts to programs until the district's healthcare costs were adjusted down by roughly $3 million. We were fortunate then to be able to make those adjustments, but we might not be lucky next year when healthcare is expected to significantly rise again. So until that volatility is removed through our labor negotiations, I believe it is critical to trim back the budget, the Board of Ed budget, as much as possible, so in future years, taxpayers can absorb any unpredictable costs and the district can avoid much deeper cuts in services. As a 5-year member of the RTM, I've been a supporter of this school district. As a majority party, the Republicans have also supported the school district by easily supporting over $50 million in projects, including Fairfield Woods Middle School, Sherman, Riverfield, Osborne Hill, Tomlinson, Ward, and Ludlow, without even factoring in this year's budget before us. We supported over $500 million in spending on education. Though we know there will be an impact, we believe it is a small impact, and the budget is still growing by $5 million this year alone. So, again, I'd like to propose a $500,000 cut to the Board of Education. That's code 58900. That brings the total to $285,515,872.
Is there a second to that motion? Representative Braun. I'm going to remind members of the body, when you are speaking at the microphone, to please speak into the microphone, and you are speaking to members of the body only. Thank you. Comments? Representative Marmion.
Sheila Marmion, District 6. As we discuss the sound, responsible budget that was voted on with bipartisan support and that is in front of us this evening, we need to ask ourselves what we as a community value. The budget before us demonstrates a commitment to the short and long-term health of Fairfield through an investment in our town services, including our educational system. What's been most encouraging this budget season is the high level of engagement of Fairfielders in the budget discussion. I wouldn't characterize it as contentious, Mr. Palmer. I would characterize it as very engaged, passionate, committed people talking about what matters to them, and that includes education. Last week, the Republican majority leaders said that they were unprepared to comment on potential budget reductions because they wanted to hear from more people. Well, we've certainly heard from people. More than 1,000 emails and still counting. Close to 40 people last week stood up at the RTM meeting to be heard, and all but 3 or 4 said that they support the town's overall budget and educational budget. Given this high level of engagement and passion, for any of us to ignore or dismiss what we have heard would be insulting and arrogant at best. Each representative here tonight needs to ask, who are you representing? Are you representing a small, somewhat extreme group that will reduce taxes by any means? Or are you representing the people here tonight, the people who emailed us, the people in your districts who elected you? All of us need to understand that we will be held accountable for these budget cuts, not just the representatives here tonight, but your decisions are going to affect the health of this town moving forward. I am thrilled that there is accountability that's going on right now. I am thrilled that people are taking note of how we are speaking and what we are saying and how we will vote. We've heard repeatedly that Fairfield is a great value. Any budget restrictions or reductions, raised this evening represent a threat to this value for both present and future homeowners. The bottom line is we need to begin to see ourselves as part of a broader community. It's not just parents and kids. It's not just seniors versus teens. It's all of us together. And all of us, no matter where we live, how big or small our home, whether we educate our kids privately or publicly, benefit from strong schools, as well as a strong library system, a vibrant senior center, responsive town services, and excellent public safety. There is a carryover effect from these services, and most importantly, education, that positively affects all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Last week before we began this discussion, I commented on some expectations, and I am going to remind every member that's in this room what my expectations are for tonight so that we can have a conversation and that we can hear from as many people as possible without interruption. Now, for all of those who weren't here last week, I ask that as we proceed that you show respect for one another, remain fair-minded and courteous regarding the different points of view. I further ask that you keep your remarks to the motion on the floor and that your remarks be non-personal and that you refrain from any outward signs of expression, such as clapping, so that we can hear from as many people as possible and to get through this evening as quickly as possible. Thank you. Representative Donovan.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. I'll be supporting that cut tonight. I wanted to talk about my support for the various budget reductions, specifically education. I believe it's really important to hold the line on budget growth, be a responsible town body. I moved to Fairfield 10 years ago, love living here. I think the level of activism that we've seen with Fairfield taxpayer faces, many people acting individually, is very refreshing. I've really enjoyed a lot of the input that I've had. I've enjoyed meeting with people on both sides to really understand their points of view. And I think it shows that Fairfield is really unique, and we can find our own path towards what's right for Fairfield. Let's just lower the tension level a little and try to look at both sides. I got a lot of emails concerning Proposition 2.5 in Massachusetts. It's pretty interesting. Figured I'd look into it. That legislation was implemented in 1982 during a time of roughly 10% inflation. It's still in effect in most communities in Massachusetts, and it holds property tax growth to 2.5% annually. Property tax growth in New York is limited to 2% or inflation, whatever's less. My New York accent showed through there for a second. Sorry about that. My focus is on academic performance and providing the best school system that we can afford. Massachusetts is actually a study for both affordability and performance. In 1993, the Massachusetts Education Reform Act was implemented through the bipartisan efforts of a Democratic legislature and a Republican governor. It took a few years for them to get it right, but by 2005, Massachusetts was the first state in the nation ever to rank first in all 4 categories measured by the National Assessment of Education Progress. By 2011, Massachusetts, if looked at as a country, was second only in the world in math to Singapore. According to the New York Times, the 3 core components of the act were more money, mostly for urban schools, ambitious academic standards, such as requiring all students to learn algebra prior to high school, and a rigorous test to graduate from high school. Interestingly, Massachusetts standards will have to decrease to meet Common Core, while Connecticut will actually need to increase to meet Common Core. But Proposition 2.5 did not stop Massachusetts from educational achievement, as it became the top state in education while limiting budget growth. Spending does not equal performance. If you compare Fairfield per pupil spending to Massachusetts towns, we would place in the top third. If you compared us to the 10 towns closest to us in student population, many of which commute to Boston, we would rank third out of 10. I also wanted to address the points raised about the role of the RTM. According to the town charter, just wanted to make sure I got this right about what our job is, because I'm new. The RTM shall determine the annual appropriations for the next fiscal year. It's clear what our role is. Finally, there's a middle ground that's beyond all this partisan stuff. Come to the middle. Let's force accountability, force higher performance in our schools. More money does not equal higher performance. High standards and accountability equals higher performance, and we can get there if we come to the middle. Thank you.
Representative Garskoff, I ask you to please refrain. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. I had a question actually for Mr. Mayor, if he's here. Is he here? About this proposed $500,000 cut and what that would translate to for the average home, how much that would change their tax bill for the coming year.
$25.
$25 for the average home from this cut.
$25.
Thank you. We've all received a lot of emails. The vast majority of the ones I've received, particularly from my own district, District 5, have been in support of the education budget. It's part of what makes Fairfield desirable. Even people who don't have kids in the schools are emailing me and saying to please support the education budget because it's what gives their houses value. It's what makes this town desirable for when they want to sell. You know, we have the advantage of being commutable to New York. That's one of our big advantages. We have beaches, but we have schools. That's what people come here for. This town is really about that. We've been making cuts. This body has made a lot of cuts over the past few years, and they're nibbling away at those schools. We still have great schools, but little things are going. Little things like JV sports in the middle schools and late buses, and we're nibbling at the edges, and we're getting closer and closer to things. Elementary school world languages has been cut. These are cuts made by this body to save the average, in this case, to save the average home $25 a year. I cannot support this, and I ask the RTM not to support this. Thank you.
Representative Pierce. I am going to ask that if you do not refrain, that I will empty the room. We cannot get through tonight's business unless we have some order. Thank you.
Phil Pierce, District 7. Through you, Madam Moderator, to either Phil Dwyer or Dr. Title. I'm curious to know what this $25 savings per household would translate into an impact to our schools.
Would either one of you like to try that?
So $25 a month is this 500 plus the... $25 a year, 50 cents a week. Okay? So this 500 is on top of the 404 that's already come out. So for us as a Board of Ed, we have to look at $904,000 of service reductions. That is on top of the $1 million last year, $250,000 the year before, 2.8 the year before. There is a cumulative effect of all of these. So I'll have Dr. Title talk a little bit about what might happen this year, but the other thing I should tell you is that the Board of Education, the superintendent makes a recommendation, but the Board of Education has to make the decision. It is hard for me, even though I'm chair, to speak on behalf of 8 other members who have not discussed exactly what they would want to cut and what they wouldn't. But it's a cumulative effect is what I think is the key message.
Thank you. Tried to make some improvements in areas that have been neglected in the budget in the past several years because of the cuts that Mr. Dwyer referenced, specifically in the areas of technology and maintenance. Anytime you end up with a budget cut, you tend to look for those areas where you maybe tried to make improvements, but perhaps have to put it off again. So it's quite likely that those areas will be reduced, will be recommended to be reduced. We, of course, would do everything we can to preserve programs. Nobody wants to cut programs. 80% of our budget is salary and benefits, so personnel has to be considered. We'll do our best, but the short answer is that we'd have to scale back on the technology and the maintenance in order to make this happen.
Thank you, Dr. Title. I just wanted to state that I do not support this cut. I think it's extremely short-sighted for this body. It's arbitrary, and it seems result-oriented, geared towards creating a certain tax reduction without any rationale. The only rationale I've heard is that we want to hold the line. But unless we're looking at the needs of our town and the impact of our town, that's not a sufficient rationale. So I cannot support this cut.
Representative Donovan. I'm sorry. I'm looking right at Representative McKenzie. Representative McKenzie.
David McKenzie, District 3, 35-year resident of this great town. And like everybody else in here, I've gotten the hundreds and hundreds of emails, and I've tried to read them all so you wouldn't think I have a day job. Essentially, there have been 2 points of view put out. One said keep the education budget exactly where it is, but the other view that was just as vocal, just as loud, was you've got to stop increasing taxes and hold it at the 1.5% growth rate, the inflation rate. We can't ignore either of them. This proposal, I think, puts us right in between those two very polarized goals. If you don't believe it, you really have to look around. We have a tax problem in this town. You will find out very quickly just talking to a realtor, and they'll tell you we have a wonderful school system, thanks to the leadership of Dr. Title and Phil Dwyer. But we have very high taxes. We are losing buyers for houses here because of that. Or if we sell the house gets sold at a lower value, in many cases below the appraised value. You also only have to look at the tax rate in nearby towns. Westport's tax rate is 24% lower than ours. And I had somebody talk to me the other day. They're selling their house here. They found one that's actually better in Westport at half the taxes. Darien and New Canaan are 40% lower. Greenwich is 55% lower. All of them have excellent schools. You can't fix a tax problem without addressing education. Education, as we all know, is 54% of the budget. And if you add in the bonding and some other expenses, it comes to 63%. So it has to be addressed. What we're talking about here, $500,000, is less than 1/3 of 1%, or if you take what's happened before, it's 0.6 of 1%. And I point out that what happens is that the education budget will grow at 3%, twice the rate of inflation, after these cuts. Some have said that it only costs $25 per household on average to make this cut. But when you add up, and I think Phil Dwyer made the right comment, and that was, it's a cumulative effect. When you look at what happened since 2008, the Great Recession, our taxes in Fairfield have gone up 30%. That's from a lot of little things, a lot of $25 a year, adding up to a 30% increase. To those members of the RTM who don't support this minimal reduction, I would say, what will you say to seniors in our town who may be here, or when you see them in your district, and many are on a fixed income? What will you say to those who are working but haven't seen their incomes go up the same 30%? And what will you say to the people who have no job at all? You'll have to face them. You can't say that you really paid any attention to what they put into you. We should recognize the voices of all members of the town. So I'm asking Republicans and Democrats who campaigned on fiscal responsibility to show that now and endorse this motion. Thank you.
Representative Gerber.
I think the Republican caucus is losing sight of something. I'd like you to ask yourselves, why did Fairfield's residential grand list skyrocket from $1.7 billion in 1990 to $9 billion in 2013? This is an increase of over 400%. What was the main driver? According to the U.S. Census reports, Fairfield had 10,400 children in Fairfield under the age of 18 in 1990. The number increased by 4,700 kids in 2010 to 15,100. Well, maybe this increase was due to a total population increase, and the kids were just a part of that? Absolutely not. Fairfield's population increased, but it was all kids, almost all kids. What happened? Well, the percentage of under 18-year-olds in Fairfield in 1990 was 19%. This grew to 25% in 2010. And it was all kids. The kids drove the increase in the population, which means that this turnover, this change in demographics of the population, is due to young families that came in during this period. So I'd like to ask this RTM to consider something. How much of the 400% increase in the residential grand list from $1.7 billion in 1990 to $9 billion in 2010, how much do you think was due to the demand for homes by these folks? These folks who came here, well, for the education system. Here's a question I'd like to ask this body to consider. Again, why did these folks come to town? It's a rhetorical question because I'm sure you read all of your emails, but I'm going to read a few of them. Okay. Okay. My wife and I considered many factors before deciding that this would be the town in which we would raise our children. The single most important factor for us was the quality of the public schools.
Towns like Norwalk and Stamford were also on our initial list, but were quickly removed due to the inferior public schools. I am writing this email as a new resident of Fairfield. My husband and I closed on our home 1 month ago after a long search for a town and neighborhood that would support our beliefs in education. We chose Fairfield after searching the tri-state area within commuting distance to New York, Bergen County, New York, Westchester County, New York, and Fairfield County. We ultimately chose Fairfield for its unique character, in addition to excellent public schools.
Are we going to go through all of them?
Well, you know, I guess you get the point. But for someone to stand up here and for real estate agents who sold us our homes to say that the cost of the education in this town is driving down home prices, I think is absolutely ridiculous. And I fundamentally reject the concept that we're spending too much. As I've said in the last meeting, if this budget is passed without cuts, our budget over the last 10 years will have increased by 42%, and enrollment and CPI compounded over 10 years is 42%. So what you're doing by making this cut is saying you don't value why people move to this town. Why people move to this town created demand which increased the value of the homes of many of the seniors who are complaining about their taxes. Thank you.
Representative Lipp. Thank you.
Jay Lipp, District 1. You will be hearing tonight from many politicians. One definition of a politician that I've heard is someone who is very good at spending everybody else's money. Funny, that's also the definition of an embezzler. Interesting. Fairfield is not just an education town. The reductions of the budget increases must include both town and education budgets to keep Fairfield affordable. I want to ask members of this body, people that could be listening in this room, those that are unemployed, or those that have a neighbor or a friend is unemployed or underemployed. Think of those people. How many people have neighbors or friends who are on a fixed income? How many of you feel that your income has lagged the increase of the cost of living, the food prices for food and gas, college expenses, and yes, your taxes? I believe that almost everyone knows someone who really can't afford the increase to their taxes. We're talking $25 per household. Other houses have more. It depends, and family income is different for everyone. I think that's a rationale for looking at budget cuts, or excuse me, not a budget cut, but a reduction in the growth of the tax rate to our citizens. That's why I was elected. That's a promise I made to my district. It was on my platform to stem the continuous increase in property taxes that have decimated this town. There's a term called tipping point, when homes, because of the increase in taxes, become less desirable to people, and they look elsewhere to towns or communities to live in. This is a dilemma for many in our town and in my district. Their taxes have increased so much that buyers are looking elsewhere, Westport, Trumbull, to where the cost of a mortgage payment, including the taxes, make Fairfield less desirable. My concern here is, and I'm sure everyone else, that this can spread from my district to the rest of the town. In the past, I've talked with Dr. Tittle. I have a lot of respect for him as an educational leader. He's an excellent administrator and a manager, and I'm confident that he can manage the budget no matter how much is increased or reduced. For those that compare our dollars spent on education and they look to the towns to the south of us, they pay their teachers more, which is the biggest contributor to the budget, the salaries. In fact, everything south on I-95, the closer to New York City you get, the more things cost. And also, please note that because of everything costs more, fewer teachers can afford to even live in the communities where they teach, and therefore they commute the extra distance, which offsets the increase in pay. based on emails from my district alone, doing the math in order to get what many people are asking for, which is the other end of the barbell when we're talking about what's happening with the budget, would be a reduction of several $1 million in the education budget. And I realize that that's not reasonable. But I also realize that the budget that's being submitted to us with the number of people that can't afford the increases is also unreasonable. Now, some of you may have heard of the prismatic study that was done several years ago. This was done, a study of the Board of Education and ways to, recommendations to increase the school's efficiencies and reduce the cost without adversely affecting our students' education or school experience. While much of the report's recommendations were adopted, others were not. I do think the Board of Education should educate the people, as well as the PTAs, on what was adopted and why it wasn't. There are still millions of dollars, according to that report, that could be trimmed. I also think the Board of Education should, again, as well as the rest of the town, conduct similar studies so that we can run our town more efficiently without a reduction of our services. And before I give up the mic, I want to say that I am pro-education. I'm an educator. I'm an administrator at a high school. I'm pro-student. I like our student counselor ratio that we have in Fairfield. I think it's exceptional. I'm pro the music and the sports program, but I'm also pro-efficiency and very tight with other people's money. I can support a smaller educational budget because I know Dr. Title can manage it. I have full confidence that a reduction can be fully absorbed. Thank you.
Representative Schwartz.
Hal Schwartz, District 7. Just to follow up on the email trails. I'm from District 7, and the District 7 emails, phone calls, and conversations that I've had over the last month. The emails from District 7 alone, and I want to commend District 7 for the work that they did. I was over 700 emails from my district alone. Okay, we had a total of 2,000 emails that came into, mostly from what we would call the one-clicks. But 700 of those were from my district. And I broke it down just to see where we are. District 7 voters, 95%, or 540 of those emails were pro-budget. Not only the education budget, but to leave the budget where it stood. So predominantly, the members of the people who elected me to represent them told me to support the budget as it came. Now, I know members here have said that the members of their districts were overwhelmingly wanted to be the 1.5%, and I'm still trying to go through the emails to find that, because of the 2,000 emails, I am 2/3 to 1/3 in favor of the budget the way it stands, and 1/3 of those 2,000 emails are telling me to keep it at 1.5%. So I think the town, by a 2/3 margin, has basically told us what they want. They want the budget to be passed the way it was passed by the Board of Finance, by the people that they elected to do the budget. All right, the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen. I've said it before and I'll say it again. That is their job. The representative town meeting is to represent the constituents of their district and to legislate. We are not here to micromanage the managers of this town to tell them where they can spend their dollars. They make a budget, they present it to the first selectman, the Board of Selectmen then presents it to the Board of Finance, and then it's presented to us. The hard work has been done by a bipartisan committees that were elected to do this process. I think we should not support this $500,000 cut. The towns that we're comparing it to, maybe their tax rates are less than ours, but their homes are considerably more expensive. So if you want to ask the people of Darien and New Canaan what they're paying with mortgage and taxes, I'm sure you'll find out that you're paying a whole lot more, because I know what my house goes for in Darien and New Canaan, and it's a lot more than it goes for here. And the education system is the reason that the Board of Education budget keeps going up, because we keep getting more students. You can't get more students in the system without the cost of education going up. The reason that people are coming here is for the education. I will not support this recommendation for a reduction, and I hope you will not support it also. Thank you.
I saw Representative Hopkins and then Devlin.
Kevin Hopkins, District 7. Through you, Madam Moderator, I would ask a question of Representative Palmer. I don't know if you want to come up first or if I'll just ask it.
Yes.
I think I did that. Mr. Palmer, the question is, as you've proposed a $500,000 cut to the Board of Education, can you please explain to us where you think the efficiencies can be found and where the savings can be found in that Board of Education budget? I have a copy here if you'd like to refer to any particular line item.
Thanks, Kevin. Joe Palmer, District 4. I will leave that. I will defer that to Dr. Title. There are things that we can look at. There's outsourcing payroll. There's looking at potential changes in our pension plans that we have the ability to affect. There are things with food services that could be done. But at the end of the day, I think if I came up here and started to spout out a bunch of things that Dr. Title could do and how the district could change, I think I'd get a really equally kind of cynical perspective from the audience. I will say, though, that this cut, while it represents $25 per household per year, it also, this increase of $5 million also represents a $250 increase per year per family.
Well, this is my fifth budget meeting on the RTM also, and it's the fourth year in a row that the Republican majority has come to the floor and made cuts to the Board of Education. I'm disappointed at the lack of specifics in that answer. Pretty much that's what we've had every year. It seems to me that if you're going to make a cut, you've got to be able to say, I know that there's certain things that the Board of Education can do better. Somewhere you can find efficiencies, services that don't need to be done. But barring that, you really have no business offering a cut. I would be willing to support a cut if someone could come up with that kind of thing. I would be willing to work with anybody on this RTM, Republican or Democrat, if they could come up with that kind of thing. But that would also require working with the town department heads, whether it be a town side or the Board of Education, in order to come up with something. You don't just make these broad, off-the-top cuts and then tell Dr. Title and the Board of Education that they got to go find it somewhere, because they're not going to find it somewhere. Over the last few years, we've seen the same thing over and over again. These cuts get made, somewhere there's supposedly efficiencies going to be found, and there aren't any efficiencies. What happens is we end up losing services to the kids, whether it's foreign languages, gifted programs, music, or now having to require kids to pay for participation in sports. I personally think that's a humiliation, that we have to see our own kids paying for participation in sports. I think we're lucky to be living in this town. I think it's not just the schools, but it's the entire town, everything, including the libraries, the fact that our roads get well paved, our police and our fire make this town very safe. The value we get for the dollars we spend is well worth it. Yes, taxes are going up, but I think given the modest increase that it's going up, it is well worth paying. And I am very, very happy to be able to pay it. And I think most people, particularly the people here tonight, are also. Some people have suggested that we've got to keep our tax increases to the rate of inflation. And that is just not true. The rate of inflation is just a broad measure of the economy. It was never meant to be for towns to say, okay, this is what you keep your keep your tax increases to. It's just an apples to oranges comparison that just doesn't add up. So, you know, again, if you're going to make cuts, you've got to come up with specifics, and that includes working with the town bodies. I have just been, since this is my 5th year on the RTM, I can only tell you how impressed I have been with the professionalism of the department heads in every department, including the Board of Education, and how hard they work to come up with efficiencies, and how hard they work to make sure that we don't pay any more in taxes that we have. I think we should pass this budget exactly as it is. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Joe Palmer, District 4. I just wanted to clarify that we're not allowed to look at any lines in the Board of Ed budget and make cuts. We're supposed to be cutting right off the top, and we can, there are suggestions to be made, but again, we leave this to Dr. Title. We also, I believe, I have a tremendous amount of trust in his ability. He understands his department, and that's essentially been, that's the practice here. Again, this even with a cut of $500,000, every household will still be paying an extra $250 based on this taxing, the increase in our budget in the education spending.
I had Representative Devlin, but Mr. Hopkins, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, it's true. We make a cut off the top of the Board of Education, but you don't, I just brought up the budget book. It's this thick. We get every single line item. We could go, and we have extensive presentations where we can ask questions about every single line item. If we want to know anything about any single one of them, we can ask. So there's always the ability to find out. And if you wanted to make a cut to the overall Board of Education budget, you do it by knowing exactly where it's going to come from, and again, working with the department heads in order to make sure that they can be accommodated. Thank you.
Representative Devlin.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Laura Devlin. I represent District 3. First, like others here, I've received a lot of input, a lot of emails, have had lots of conversations. I've heard very passionate views, very varying views. I have read every email. I have not replied to every email. I've even read the material that's been mailed to my home. One thing that's clear is that we are a town that is becoming increasingly divided, largely based on things I think we really agree on. I believe everyone in our town wants very much for strong schools and wants our children to be well educated. And thanks to the leadership of Dr. Title and Phil Dwyer, we do. But what we need to do is balance that as well with having taxes to the point now where residents, families, and seniors are being forced to leave the town because they can't afford to be here. I've even heard comments that if you can't afford to leave here, then move out. And this comes from the same families who say they moved here for the family-oriented town. Affordability is a real issue for Fairfield, and therefore I will support the motion to reduce the increase of the Board of Education. Thank you.
Representative Jacob, then Representative Gottlieb.
Ellen Jacob, District 9.
I'm going to ask you to speak directly into the microphone.
Okay, let's see if this... Ellen Jacob, District 9. I did want to make the distinction between us and the other town boards who all work hard. We are neighborhood representatives, so we are part of a certain geography in town. Therefore, we don't all, some of us get the same emails, but we also have different cross-sections in our neighborhoods. We do get different mixtures of what people want. And it is our job to take care of all the people in our district as well as look out for the town. I'm from District 9, and we do have a mixture of people in District 9. We do have parents who are worried about a good education. We have seniors who are struggling to stay in their homes. And we also have families who are struggling to pay their taxes and see their children grow up in their homes. So it's not the same for all of us. And I think that's part of our strength. I want to say that I was happy to hear Dr. Title answer the query about how he might try to handle or manage a cut of this size, because I myself, and I'm speaking only for myself, looking through the line items in the Board of Ed budget book, did see a number of items that definitely seemed as though they could be delayed 1 year and not hurt classes. I think classes are important, and teachers are important, and electives are important. So I was glad to hear that. I hope that happens. Thank you.
Representative Gottlieb.
Julie Gottlieb, District 6. I will say very quickly thank you to everyone that emailed and spoke and came out to our Saturday morning for 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to cut to the chase here. I myself was educated in Massachusetts during Proposition 2.5. Probably the less said about that, the better. Just a couple of things I want to clarify, and forgive me because I am picking up on a couple of comments that were said here and there. The prismatic audit that was referred to was performed before the school security initiatives brought on by the state, and also before Newtown, and also before the federal mandates that came, the unfunded mandates that happened in the last year. So while it is still a document that I'm sure is referred to, I'm personally not sure that it is as viable as it was once. This is not about parents versus seniors. I keep hearing that, and I find that highly depressing. I want us to stop making it about one or the other. Home values and school quality are directly linked, and the bottom line is that we need to begin to see each other as part of a broader community. It's not parents and kids, seniors and teens. It's all of us together. And all of us, no matter where we live or how big or small our home, whether we educate our kids privately or publicly, benefit from strong schools, a strong library system, a vibrant senior center, responsive town services, and excellent public safety. There is a carryover effect from these services, whether we use them or not, and that positively impacts all of us as a larger community. I'm not a politician. After 3 years of this, I'm fairly certain I don't ever want to be. But I am one of the people that has been referred to. I lost my job in 2008. Those of you who know me and know my family know that this has been an extremely trying time, and for me to get up here and speak about that personally is a huge deal as I look at my family in the bleachers. But I will let you know that come hell or high water, I will find that $25 for my child's education.
Before we go, Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, District 1. Through you, Madam Moderator, I have a couple of questions for Dr. Title, please.
Certainly. Dr. Title, would you please join us?
Thank you, Dr. Title, and thank you for everything that you do for the town and the school system. Just in terms of thinking about savings, which may not be fully reflected in the budget right now, my understanding is that there are a few items which may result in some additional potential savings, and maybe you could speak to each one of those. One, the potential outsourcing of payroll services. I know at the budget meeting, I think you said that you had 2 people doing that, but you were open to looking into it as Greenwich was saving significant monies. I think the verdict is still out on what the revenue will be from the outsourcing of food services. I could be wrong, but I think there are potentially a couple of extra retirements. I think there are lower pension costs. And also, is it true that there are no new net students anticipated for the school year?
You might. Okay. In terms of the outsourcing of the payroll services, that would be a long-term issue. Greenwich did that, awarded a bid for that in January, and they're not implementing it until October. So anybody who thinks that can happen tomorrow, I've also done some research about that and talked to people in Greenwich, and I think it's really unclear what the savings would be. It's a completely different situation from ours. I said I'm willing to look at it, but it's of no immediate value. We do our payroll. The town of Greenwich has had eight payroll people on the town side and one on the Board of Ed side for 3,400 employees. We have 2 payroll clerks for our entire employee base. So the potential savings there is probably not what it was in Greenwich. It was a completely different situation. And based on some of the preliminary numbers, it looks like they may not be saving much at all. But I'm willing to look at it. But that has nothing to do with this budget. That was an idea that one of the members brought up, asked would I be interested in looking at it. I'd be happy to look at it. If it saves money down the road, we'll keep looking at it. And we also have to do that in concert with the town. Revenue savings from outsourcing food services, that has no impact on our budget. There's nothing there. A couple of extra retirements. There may be a couple of extra retirements. Each retirement is worth about $36,000. 2 extra, $72,000. I've got a $404,000 cut net of the lower pension costs. The lower pension costs are already factored in. So there was an $804,000 cut, of which known savings were about half that, and lower pension costs were already baked into that. So that's not a savings. And there are no net new students. We are predicting stable enrollment for next year, and at the same time, we're also not increasing the number of certified staff or administrators, despite the new burdens that have been placed on that. So really, the only one that has any potential would be a couple of extra retirements, but everything else would not be there. So I think if this body's trying to find savings to hand to me, it's really a fool's errand. It's the Board of Ed that has to make the decisions. I appreciate how I'm so wise now about all these cuts, when many of you have spent, not many of you, but some people in town have spent the better part of 6 months insinuating that we mismanage, we don't know how to plan, we don't know how to spend, we don't know how to budget, we're not transparent, et cetera, et cetera. Now all of a sudden when you want to cut the budget, I'm a genius. I find that inconsistent.
Representative Hurley.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Title.
Any other members of the body that have not spoken? Representative Wall. Yes.
Jay Walk, District 6. How do I follow that? God, I don't know where to begin. I will be short and sweet for people who know me that will speak forever. First of all, I just heard that you trust Dr. Title. So if you trust Dr. Title, and he says no more cuts, then why are we cutting the Board of Ed budget? I'm also hearing from various members on this body that Greenwich has lower taxes. I'm going to reiterate what our minority leader, Hal Schwartz, just said. Yes, taxes may be lower in Greenwich. Schools may be better. They also have less schools than we do, by the way. We have 16 schools here in Fairfield. Other towns may have 4. Test scores, I've heard that we're not having great test scores. We have a diversity of population here that Trumbull doesn't have or Shelton doesn't have. But I don't see an influx of people flying to Greenwich to live. We'd have nobody here in Fairfield.
The current tax increase is at 2.38%. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle wanted to bring it down to 1.84. That's $30, a total of $30 per household. Don't forget, the majority of people that live in Fairfield don't live in $5 million homes. When I moved here 13 years ago, my wife and I looked in Portchester, New York. A cottage with less than a quarter-acre property. Less than a quarter acre. We were on top of another house. The real estate agent shows us the house, and I asked, how much is taxes? There were $11,000 at that time. We looked at other neighborhoods. We looked at other towns. We came here to Fairfield. I come here to Fairfield, and the taxes are about $4,000. I also am appalled that we're bringing the Board of Ed. It's an attack. Every year I see there's an attack on the Board of Ed. Why? Do we want to not have better for our kids because some people don't have children or their children are out of the house and they moved on? I am for seniors too. I'm a senior. I pay taxes here in this town. We, as a body, approved a tax relief program for seniors. That's because we all care about seniors. It's not about seniors or kids. God. Thank you, Dr. Title and Phil Dwyer, for all the countless hours that they have put in and tried to make us see the light. All the meetings I've been to, all the Board of Finance meetings I've been to, all the Board of Selectmen meetings we've been to, all the Board of Ed meetings we've been to. Is this all for nothing? Over $500,000 you guys think it's going to save the town of Fairfield? It's not. The police department, cars, the fire department. We are very lucky in this town to have a fire department and police department here. When we have an emergency, we have the police department come, the fire department come, and an EMT come. There's some towns that only a fire truck shows up. If it's an emergency, you may have to wait 20 minutes or a half an hour, and somebody might not make it in your home. In my home, the fire department showed up in 2 minutes for an emergency. Twice. God. I'll end it on this, everyone. I obviously, you can all see I'm against this cut of the Board of Ed budget. It is absolutely appalling. Also, I just remembered that somebody here remarked that if you're a politician, that you're an embezzler. I'm appalled at that remark. I'm not an embezzler. I'm a politician, and I'm proud of it. We look for the bad in this town. We look for the fear. Everybody looks for the fear, the doom and gloom. Thank you.
I have Board of Finance member Albin that wishes to speak. Then we'll go to McCardle.
Can you hear me now? I'll scream into the microphone. Catherine Albin from the Board of Finance. And as a member of the Board of Finance, we kept the Board of Education budget intact this year. But I also have the distinction of having been a 12-year member of the Board of Education and their chair for 3 terms. And I would normally not speak at the RTM's meeting on any item that you have on the floor and respect your work here tonight and other nights as well. But with my past history and the experience I have of what has happened to our schools since the mid-2000 decade, when reductions have been made to the point where both Superintendent Dr. Clark and Superintendent Dr. Title have had to find ways to absorb those reductions. And Eventually, after you take in excess of $10 million, some people say upwards to $14 million, out of an operational budget for an organization that has grown since 2008, roughly, to probably now by about 10%, it gets harder. You can find ways to do it, but eventually you're going to damage your product. Now, I've listened to all the speakers from this body talk to one another, and I am talking just to this body. You can try to convince one another that this doesn't hurt, this is balancing everyone's pain, that it will hurt your viewpoint, whatever that viewpoint is. But I can do math. I wasn't educated in Fairfield, but I learned simple math. There's 34 members of this body who control the votes. And the motion to make this reduction came from the members with 34 votes. You can keep talking to one another and you can get more emotional all night long as the next person comes to the microphone, or you can vote this item, because I have a pretty good idea what the outcome is. And all I would say to those on the majority vote is that these reductions will eventually go so far that they damage the product of the Fairfield public school system. I know, because I've had to make those decisions. Thank you.
Representative McCardle.
Lori McCardle, District 9. Obviously, this is my first time through this whole process. Been a little quiet, I think, at most of the meetings, trying to take it all in. But I have to say, I find all of this emotion and the divisiveness a little upsetting tonight. I think we need to be united, and I think we need to focus on the positive. This is a great town. You know, I've been here, been involved in this town since 1983, when I started as a middle school math teacher at Fairfield Woods. Taught there for 14 years. I have 4 children. They've all gone through the schools. My best friends are teachers. You know, nobody can tell me that I don't care about kids or that I don't care about education. But I care about the town too. And when I campaigned last fall, I knocked on over 600 doors. Not just Republican doors. I knocked on every door, on any street I went down. Nobody told me that the schools aren't good. Nobody told me that we don't spend enough on the schools. But I can tell you that over and over, people said to me, it's costing too much. The taxes are out of control. We have to do something different. What I said to people is, I don't know if I can make a difference, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to think out of the box. I'm going to try to come up with different ideas. And that's what I'd like to try to do, and I think that we all need to work together to do those kinds of things. We need to reduce the spending. Bottom line, when we're talking right now about the school budget is, and I guess it carries over to the town too, you know, contracts and people are our biggest cost. And we're going to have to look to our leadership. They've got to address this ever-increasing cost of the contracts and make it so that we can afford to hire and keep the people that we need. And also, to that note, I would say one of the other things that's come up a number of times is the unfunded mandates that we have to face. I'd love to see some of us and then the PTAs put some of their effort toward looking at this stuff. Why do we have to do some of these things? Perhaps they're not in our best interest. Who are these mandates put down by? They're put down by us, the people that we send there. So we need to think. I want to say that I support this reduction.
Thank you. Representative Malarogno.
Jeff Malarogno, District 8. This is my first year being on the RTM, and it's been quite an experience so far. As everybody's alluded to, I've gotten quite a few emails throughout this budget season, and as I unfortunately haven't had time to reply to all of them, I definitely have read them, and as I said, it's been a sobering experience. I bought my house about 12 years ago on Black Rock Turnpike in the southern section towards 95. It's got an 1/8 of an acre lot. It's a modest cape built in 1937. So basically what I'm getting at is my house is not the average house in town. It's actually much less in value than the average house. We've heard tonight, and we will probably keep hearing tonight, that proposed reductions will have X amount of dollar impact on the average household tax increase over the year. However, in my 12 years, despite having that well below the average value house in town, my taxes have gone up 220%. 220%. So just think that what a bargain, quote unquote, a bargain today is for taxes may not be the same down the road if we keep going on the same path we are. Thank you.
Representative McCarthy, and then I'm going to ask the members of the body if they have no need to make their opinion known. It's 9:25, and I'd like to hear from the members of the public, some of which have brought their children.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Tom McCarthy, District 8. Time for a 7-inning stretch. This $500,000 reduction to the year-over-year increase we are discussing right now represents 0.3%. If it is passed by this body, the year-over-year increase will be roughly 3% for the Board of Ed, actually 2.994. So I just want to take this moment to remind ourselves what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a budget reduction. We're talking about a year-over-year increase. And limiting the size of that increase somewhere by some mechanism, we have to limit these increases, even if you can talk yourself into it by doing the math and saying it represents per household $25. That's how you can talk yourself into anything using that methodology. So just as you say, I'll sit down. I just want to again remind everybody we are not arguing about a cut. We are arguing about limiting the size of the increase.
All right, Representative Steele.
Jeff Steele, District 2. I'd like to make a few general comments, and then I'll address this proposed cut. First of all, I know that many people were unhappy with last Monday's RTM hearing, specifically that no cuts were proposed at that time. I understand, but I want to reiterate that the Republican caucus was simply not ready. It would have been premature to make proposals that were not on solid ground, as consensus had not been attained on certain items, and it would have set off alarms that did not need to be set off. Still, there was much outcry over this action. Even though we heard from over 40 members of the public that night, we still heard criticism that was directed at this body and at the Republican caucus and at specific people that got way too personal. That was unfortunate and shameful. That aside, I do want you all to know that this caucus has done a tremendous amount of research and work, maybe more than any time I have witnessed since I've been on the RTM. In regards to the budget, I believe that we need to keep the tax rate down as much as possible. I think everyone believes this, and everyone agrees that this town needs to be as affordable as we can make it for both seniors and families.
while maintaining the services and amenities that we have all come to appreciate in town. To really bring spending down, we have to continue looking at our long-term liabilities as they pertain to labor costs and benefits, and that happens at contract renewal time. Further, I believe we need to bring in more commercial tax revenue to this town as a way to reduce the taxes that we citizens have to pay. But for tonight's purpose, voting on the annual budget, we are all looking to keep spending in check where it makes sense. To do this entails spreading the pain and responsibility across multiple departments. In regards to this proposed cut to the Board of Ed budget, what I won't do is make a decision based on one group of people wants me to do or others to do. And we know that there are certainly two sides of this issue. To make my decision, I have listened to the reasoning of the Fairfield Taxpayer Group and the people they represent, as well as the reasoning of the FACES Group and the people they represent. I've reviewed over 1,200 emails. I've heard the public speak last Monday. I've discussed with RTM members, and I've listened to what my constituents and people throughout town have to say, and I've done my own research. All of this due diligence has allowed me to make an informed decision. I believe Dr. Title is an excellent administrator and has been doing a great job of keeping costs low and managing our school system. I look at scores and rankings, and we are consistently among the best in the state. The average annual budget increase over the past 5 years has been 1.61%, lower than contracted salary and benefit increases alone, and lower than the average rate of inflation. I applaud his work. In regards to any proposed reduction in the request, and let's remember again, we cannot legally cut the Board of Ed budget year to year. This is a reduction in the request. I do believe it is hard for this body to make specific recommendations for cuts, whether it is revising the House system, reducing psychologists, cutting electives, or sports. I prefer to leave that to the people who are education experts. What I will say is that some things do need to be maintained. I have 3 kids in the public school system. I have a wife who is a former PTA president. I don't have a PhD in education, but I don't have to look far to see that mental health and bullying are potentially the greatest threats to our kids in the schools. School psychologists and guidance counselors are crucial to the stability of our educational environment, and that is one of the items I believe needs to be maintained. So, while I believe that the Board of Ed can share the burden of reduced spending, I think that $500,000 is too much. Higher special education costs, more unfunded state mandates, contracted costs such as salaries, benefits, transportation, and tuition, and new security have left $352,000 in discretionary spending, but that was wiped out by $800,000 on the BOE budget request before it even got to us. As of now, there is no last-minute positive health insurance experience data or insurance carrier savings, which did exist last year, and there are no surprise teacher retirements so far. So with a $500,000 cut, the BOE will fall behind the technology and maintenance department. Essentially, we will kick the can down the road. So while I think it can handle a further reduction, I am not comfortable supporting a proposed $500,000 cut.
Thank you, Representative Steele. Any other members of the body wish to speak? Representative Braun.
Catherine Braun, District 8. I support the cut, the $500,000 cut. And just to be clear to everybody in this room, this body has never cut the budget. It has always sustained an increase over the prior year. Even with the $500,000 cut, 90% of the increase requested over the prior year will be maintained. So instead of a 3.3% increase, it will be a 3% increase. So there is no cut. There is an increase over the prior year. We have to balance how we manage this budget. Every year, this is my 5th budget season, every year we drill down on a detail level in all the areas. But because we can't cut line items in the Board of Ed, we tend to be much more scrutinizing of the town side, which supports the Board of Ed. The town side, when you do all the portions that support the Board of Ed, is really probably less than 40%. It's more like 33 or 35% of the overall budget, whereas the money that supports the Board of Ed is more in the 60s. You can't drill down on the town side year after year and scrutinize it and not share that burden with the Board of Ed. So the 500,000, again, it will still go up by 3% over the prior year. There are areas where I see, I'm looking at something that I found out at the Board of Ed budget meeting. Non-union people, that salary line is going up by almost $200,000. In terms of union, you can't do anything about union, but if you have the ability, you can cut back on numbers. So, for example, there are 77 custodians according to the budget book. That's going up by $121,000 plus benefits. So we all have to do more with less. Just like in a corporation, business clients, households, you find a way to do more with less. And I think there's a way of doing that. I think it can be relatively harmless. I don't think many people, a great proportion of people in this room, have gotten increases of, for example, the custodian budget, I believe, went up by 3.4%. Again, that's union, but maybe you can cut back a couple of positions. And the non-union, I don't know why, most of the people I know in business have not gotten a raise at all. And I don't know why that should be going up by almost $200,000. There's many areas where you could do something and it would not cut programs. So my point is, you can't drill down year after year on the line items on the town side and not share that situation. We have reached a tipping point. I've gotten almost an equal number of response from people who are extremely concerned about their doubling tax rate and their inability to support it, as I have from people who don't want to look behind the numbers. I think if you look behind the numbers, there is area to be more reasonable, more efficient, and do more with less. So I will support the $500,000 reduction to the increase in the Board of Ed budget.
Thank you. Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 4. I am woefully disappointed with this this recommendation to lower the Board of Ed budget, and I'm really, frankly, surprised at the love fest that we're having now with Dr. Title after months and months of criticism. So I'm a little confused by that. I find it very troubling that we're cutting the budget. And yes, this body has cut that budget in the past, and I do have a voting record. And frankly, the supermajority of voters who are in the audience also have that record of who has cut the budget in the past. We're talking $25 a year, 50 cents a week. I moved to town for this education budget. The majority of families have moved to town for the education budget. They want it supported. 2/3 of the emails that we received, I would say even a higher percentage of that, has asked us to support the budget as is. And for us to completely disregard that request, I find it negligent on our part, frankly. I will be supporting the budget in its entirety. I will not support this motion to cut, and I encourage all of you to do the same. And we will be remembered in November. Thank you.
Representative Ambrose.
Peter Ambrose, District 2. I find it troubling that that Representative Dean suggests that members of our caucus, the Republican caucus, has been critical to Dr. Title, Phil Dwyer, and to the Board of Education. I don't know of anyone in our caucus who has been. And we believe in the work that Dr. Title has done. We're proud of having such a good superintendent of schools to serve our town. I would like to state that I've been a resident of Fairfield since 1956, when fortunately my parents decided to move to this town. My father was a school teacher for 40 years in this town, so I'm very well aware of how important the educational process is. I'm further aware of the significance of a good education system in a town. And it's that quality of education that has attracted so many families to this town. Part of my occupation is a real estate attorney.
and I deal with countless numbers of people day in and day out who come to this town. And I proclaim that Fairfield not only has a tremendous educational system, but has diversity that has attracted families to this town. Again, I'm committed to our educational system. I graduated from here, from this system. I've got 3 children who graduated from this system. I've got 2 grandchildren who are waiting to enroll in the system. I, for one, am a strong advocate of a good educational system. But as an RTM representative, I strive to find a balance, to balance the needs of all the residents in town. The children, the senior citizens, those who are unemployed, and those who are underemployed. It is a reality that many of our citizens are struggling to pay their taxes. And it is a reality that many of our residents are moving from the town of Fairfield because they find that it's too expensive to live here. I see it every day. This town is not just an education town, however. It supports seniors. It's meant to support all the residents of this town. I am supporting this amendment tonight of $500,000. I believe that it's a minimal reduction to the increase in the educational budget. And I'm confident that Dr. Title and the Board of Education can absorb this $500,000 cut. And I say it because I do think we need to balance our concerns for this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the members of the body? All right. Seeing none, I am going to go to the members of the public. I'm going to ask any member of the public that wishes to speak to the motion to reduce the Board of Education appropriation by $500,000 to come to the microphone on my left. I'm going to ask that you line up. And furthermore, as last week, you will be limited to the amount of time that you have to speak. I ask everyone who wishes to make comment to please come and form a line by the podium. Thank you. All right, last week, every member of the public had 2 minutes to speak. And as we all know, 2 minutes can be quite a long time. I am going to ask that all members of the public hold their comments to 90 seconds. And you will be timed. Representative Ferentz is our favorite timer, and he will hold up a 15-second to go in the timing. I ask that you speak to the motion and speak to the members of the body. And it will be okay that if a member of the public standing behind you has something similar to say, it's okay to say, I agree with the previous speaker. Thank you.
Stephen Scheinberg, District 1, here tonight against this motion. The schools need the money. You talk about percentages. We're paying administrators to fund the budget as we need it. And so percentages to me don't matter. What matters is that the schools need those funds. I moved to Fairfield a year and a half ago. I love Fairfield. I love the neighbors I met. And I'd just like to know if everyone that's against this motion in this room could please stand up and show the RTM how many people are against this motion.
Point of order. I ask that there be no public
I apologize.
displays.
I apologize.
Thank you.
I think
That's-
that you could see on the RTM that this motion is going too far. I met some Republicans, and you control this body, and we talked about being reasonable. We talked about making a symbolic cut. This is not a reasonable cut. $500,000 will hurt the technology budget, will hurt the facilities that we have, and is unacceptable to the people you see in this room. People that vote for this motion will be held accountable next November because, as I stated before, you have waken up a sleeping giant in the parents in this room, some of whom want to go to referendum tomorrow morning. That, I think, would not be good for the town. We are all neighbors. We all disagree. I disagree with my wife sometimes on the budget and on spending. So please vote against this motion and be reasonable.
Thank you.
Portia Drandaria, District 8. I'm going to speak to something else, not just the budget.
I'm going to ask you to hold your comments to the motion on the floor, which is a $500,000 reduction.
But I do want to talk about some of the comments that were made.
No,
because
the motion on the floor of $500,000.
The $500,000 are important to this town. You cannot cut them. And I suggest that the people who are thinking of cutting them, please look into their conscience. Don't vote only because your party does so a certain way. And I'm not talking to one party or the other. Vote your conscience.
Thank you.
Thank you. John Levinson, 883 Harbor Road. There's only one line item in the BOE. I consider this good news because the RTM can define the budget and leave the decisions of where to find efficiencies up to Fairfield's experts, Dr. Title and his team, and the Board of Ed. It's impossible for us, I would argue even the BOE, to analyze the detail of the BOE budget without getting access to data that shows where we are spending what, including a breakdown of the budget by program, like Greenwich, Newtown, and many others give. Looking beyond that, at what is disclosed, I see a BOE that appears top-heavy and academic spending light. And I don't see a BOE that's creative and aggressive to find better and less expensive ways of spending our money, particularly on non-academic programs. I support the proposed reduction of growth in the BOE budget. Frankly, I think more could be done, and I think that we can do more in the future. Let the BOE and Dr. Title find savings that least impacts our academic programs. I think the ground is fertile. I urge all Democrat and Republican RTM members who ran on a platform of keeping our budget growth low to vote so. That's the majority of you. Please keep your Election Day promise. Your constituents, both
Thank you, Mr.
silent
Levinson.
and loud, expect that.
David McInnes, RTM District 1. I'm speaking against this proposal. This is $500,000 on top of a total of $800,000 already cut from the BOE budget. We've asked the BOE and Dr. Title to do their job and to come up with a very reasonable budget that they can live with, and yet here we're sort of second-guessing them and cutting it. We have to realize that we should applaud Dr. Title and the BOE for the work they've done. We are spending less per pupil than neighboring school districts, and we've also kept our increase significantly less than other school districts. We've kept it, and we've also kept it less than the general rate of increase in education spending. So we should be applauding him for the work he's done. Further, in the past years, we've allowed the town budget as a whole to grow faster than the BOE budget, and again, year after year, it's always the BOE budget that we talk about that has too much fat in it, and yet the town is growing as a percentage of its total faster than the BOE budget. This particular year, the BOE budget, I believe, is growing at a faster percent than the town budget. So I, along with, as you can tell, lots of people in this room, urge you to vote against this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Carlisle Spivey. I live in District 1. As it may be obvious, I am a senior. Also, I am a bit of an oddity in that neither my husband nor I have children, and by extension, no grandchildren. So some might say we don't have skin in the game. But the skin in the game that we have is that we came to Fairfield because we love Fairfield. And part of what we love about Fairfield is the great quality of the town, and that is made up in a major part by its education system. Now, an education system is a service that the town government provides. It is not a business. The point of a business is to maximize profits. That's fantastic. That's what a business should do. And you measure that efficiencies in a business by dollar signs. The point of an education system is to produce the best educated students we can. And the efficiencies in that are not dollar signs. The efficiencies of that is the quality of the education that we provide. I greatly oppose the motion to cut $500,000 from the school board budget.
Thank you.
Matt Hutzman, District 4. Just like to start a definition mandate in order to cut something out of one's control. All right, one thing I always hear is I hear bandied about a lot is a 70-30 number. Only 30% of the town uses the education system. The other 70% pays for it. Another number I'd like to propose is 90-10. Probably about 10% of the residents of this town would get any kind of meaningful use out of a cut in this budget, but the rest of the 90% of us would get no utility out of that money at all. We're the ones that use the services. I live in the middle of town. I'm probably about a mile from both libraries. I know I'm not supposed to. And I can walk to Osborne Hill School. The value in our home is determined by the fact that we are right near what I think is one of the best schools in the town. People who buy if anyone would buy our house after this, they would use the value in our house is because of the school system. People who look at our house wouldn't be looking at the W's, Westport, Wilton, Weston. They would be looking at other places. I don't want them to see a headline that says 500,000 or whatever cut from Fairfield schools. Basically, I would just say, which part of Fairfield do you stand with all of us, or do you stand for a small minority that are the people that really stand to benefit from these cuts? Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanford, would you please go to the microphone?
My name is Virginia Sanford. Can you hear me? I'm going to talk for two people, myself and Jim Wickersham. Ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, first, this is Jim Wickersham, and also I'm saying this too. First, I appreciate all the time, effort you put in, but in my opinion, we are going in the wrong direction. Many of us have frozen incomes, but our taxes are going up faster. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Our taxes are going faster than inflation. Frankly, the town services are not that great. We did not move here for the education, and that's not that great. The overbloated school maintenance budget, the overindulgent over-decoration of the schools, do they make the education any better? Besides, we can't even build schools that do not leak. And by the way, I have built 2 houses and I run a business. I will be quick.
Okay, 15 seconds.
I am thinking of moving away, either to Westport, Wilton, or better still, South Carolina or North Carolina. Hold the budget flat.
Thank you,
I
Mrs.
did it
Sanford.
in businesses wait a minute, and it worked wonders.
I think we need to be...
Stand up. That's for Jim.
Thank you.
Now
Thank
I may
you.
talk for myself.
No, I'm sorry. You get one bite at the apple tonight.
I can't hear you.
You cannot speak for more than yourself, and you've already had your...
I've spoken for Jim Wickersham.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wickersham.
Don't cut me off with all these people, all these soccer moms and their children. You won't listen to the other side of town. I just wanted to know. It is outrageous. My taxes are more than I paid for the house.
Mrs.
$25.
Sanford, I'm
My
going to
taxes
ask
go
that
up
you remove
$2,000 or
yourself from the
$3,000
microphone.
a year. It has got to stop. You are going to lose all the big
Mrs. Sanford.
spenders. You will have nobody left. I cannot talk anymore.
All right, thank you very much.
Deep breath. My name is Tara Cook-Littman. I'm in District 3. I have 3 children at Burr Elementary School. This town is activated like I have never seen. It's partially because we've had wonderful leadership leading the charge this year, but it's also because our children are feeling the cuts from prior years. And I know we can't get those back, but our children feel it. Your children feel it. Our children. We cannot continue to cut the school budget this way. If I had more time, I'd give you specific examples, but what I can tell you is that the burden is being shifted onto PTAs and parents to fill the gaps that the budget is not able to do, which creates inequities throughout the town. And for me, and I haven't heard anyone else mention that, that's a real problem. We are a community. Thriving communities think about the greater good. Let's all think about the greater good before we vote on this budget cut tonight. Please do not cut the budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Sharon Strelzer, District 2. As Tara said and I said last week, we're a community. We work together, we play together, we educate our children together. We shouldn't listen to bullies. Bullies aren't allowed at school. They shouldn't be allowed in this meeting. And I'm being dead serious about this. I'm tired as a 22-year resident listening to this nonsense. I am a constituent. I elected some people out here, and I don't find it acceptable that my voice can't be heard. I never heard from anybody in District 2. I've emailed 4 times. I couldn't even tell you who they are out there right now. I think that if you truly are listening to the people, and there are many people online here tonight to talk to you about supporting this education, then that's what this is about. We're about, I think, about 60,000 residents, and we're talking about a $500,000 cut. That's $8 per person. I can't understand why anybody in this town cannot afford $8 per year. That's really sad. I look at our buildings. My daughter is a sophomore. 2 years out, I'll be out of the game. I could say, forget about it. Education is our foundation, and I appreciate you that you keep it in mind. And please, please support the budget and pass it as is. Thank you.
Hi, Carol Guernsey, 80 Sigwin Drive. I'm in District 8, and I do not support this proposal. Even the idea of these cuts is appalling. I hold each one of you accountable for your actions. Your constituents have spoken. Please show us you're listening.
Mark Patton, 503 Valley Road, member of the Board of Education. Madam Moderator, if I could ask some lenience in your time. I know
I'm
what
sorry.
your time constraints, because I know there's a
I
long
want to
line.
get through everybody's remarks. If you want to wait till last, that'd be fine with me.
Well, all right. Well, I'll see how far I go. All right. You can start the clock. Now, am I wasting my time here is the first thing I want to say. Because many of you won't listen. Year after year, and I've been through 8 budget cycles as a member of this body, as a member of the Board of Ed, PTA, et cetera, that it's the same story every year. You hear the same excuses. This budget's been through all the town boards, all the town bodies. The tough questions have been asked. There were surprises like there were every year, but overall the major departments and areas of importance have remained flat and unchanged. Budget drivers were the usual suspects like health insurance and employee contractual obligations. Things like union contracts that this body, in the last year or so, have voted roughly 2% increases for teachers and other unions for town employees. So if you want to keep the rate, the tax increase to the rate of inflation, which is now at 1.5%, last year was about 2.5%, how does that math work? Show me that math where you can fit 2% into 1.5%. But you approve those contracts. Yet you still want to take a cut at this budget and I'm sure other budgets throughout this evening. If we keep nickel and diming things with arbitrary cuts, you've heard property values will drop. Don't think they won't. People come to this town because of the school system. Young families do, middle-aged families do. That's why they come here. And don't kid yourself that making cuts from these large items, like the Board of Ed budgets, they're going to lead to services and other programs cut. I'll come back if you won't let me finish. Yes? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Tina Rembish. I am a resident of 3425 Park Avenue. I have a good deal of knowledge and experience in many areas. I'm a teacher at Fairfield Public Schools. I've been a resident of Fairfield for 35 years, and I am a parent of 3 children, 2 of whom have special needs. One of my children was on the list. She had to be outplaced for personal reasons, but it was her right to a free and appropriate public education. I'm here to share a different statistic with you tonight. I'm a teacher. I'm all about passion and teaching children like their lives depend upon it, because they do. But I'm here to tell you that our most vulnerable population, those who are able to go to college and hold jobs and potentially get married, who have some special learning needs, have an 85% rate of unemployment or underemployment. Those children were not served 40, 30, even 25 years ago. We're doing much more now than we ever have before. And I have news for you. You can't do more with less. You can do less with less. And so, those who are unemployed and underemployed and can't afford their taxes, my fear is that my 2 children, upon graduation, will join them.
Thank you.
Eugene Hoffman, District 5, 118 Whitewood Drive. Thank you all for your service. I fail to see how the sponsor of this amendment can say that there will be little noticeable impact when the RTM as a body cannot dictate the specifics of a cut. I challenge you to make your decision based on facts, not opinion. The grand list, the value of all taxable property, rose in 2012 and 2013. We've heard members express the desire for sharing pain and balance. I ask you not to split the baby. I beg you, do not second-guess the expertise of the town managers and Dr. Title. Please vote down this amendment. A lower increase is still a cut when expenses are rising. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patty Donahue, and I live at 1333 Congress Street. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Title for his thoughtful and thorough budget that he's presented. I just want to start out by saying I'm a registered Republican, and I consider myself to be very conservative, and I've always voted for and supported people and elected officials that are fiscally responsible. I do need to say tonight that I feel like passing the budget as it is fiscally responsible. Supporting the budget is something that we need to do. It's directly tied to our home values. We all know that. Any reduction will produce cuts that are vital to programs and staff for our children. I moved here 4 years ago, and I feel like I'm very fortunate to live in an area that has an excellent educational system and great services for my special education child. Each year, I have seen the budget cut, and jobs, programs, and services have fallen victim to these cuts. I am disheartened and concerned that this is what our future holds here in Fairfield. This is a very difficult process, and please keep in mind that those of us who do support the school systems are not only taxpayers, but we do vote and we will remember this when we have to vote again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. Trudy Durrell, 64 Woodcrest Road. I am a lifelong 45-year resident of this town. I am a mom of 2 children, a product of Fairfield Public Schools, and I am the co-president of Holland Hill PTA, and I'm just going to do a quick shout out because my other co-president is here, and I'm speaking on behalf of our PTA as well as a mom tonight. Since we were having some vocabulary lessons earlier, I have a few to share with you. Reduce. Synonyms. Consolidate, diminish in size, amount, or number, to narrow down, restrict, demote, downgrade, to become diminished or lessen, decrease, and my 3 personal favorites, pulverize, conquer, and to force to capitulate. I also have a few questions. You've had the opportunity to ask yours and to do your due diligence. And I would only ask, how long do we ask Dr. Title to manage the budgets that continually you ask for to be reduced, or whatever synonym you prefer? And at what cost? Those of us that support the education budget also support the seniors, the library, paved roads. We are one town, one community. And having said that, I am prepared to write my $250 check right now and to write one for a senior citizen who can't afford it, because my children, who would be directly affected, are worth $500 to me. Are they worth it to you?
Thank you.
Jan Reber, District 9. You, our esteemed RTM members, are our last line of defense. Oh, sorry. Our Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and especially our Board of Education have placed on your heads the difficult job of adopting a more balanced and sustainable budget than the one that was presented to you. Our selectmen are elected to a 4-year term, but they do not create a 4-year financial plan for Fairfield, or even a 2-year plan. We go through the same thing every year. Understanding and stopping unsustainable trends in spending is up to you. If we don't slow spending by our 400th town anniversary, our budget will exceed $500 million. Over $500 million to be funded mostly by taxes on our homes. And that assumes just a 2% annual increase with no spike in inflation. If we don't stop now, when will we? Protect Fairfield. Please cut the budget to a level of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you leave the microphone, for the clerk, could you just give your name?
Oh, Jan Reber, District 9.
Thank you.
Urban Lime Cooler, 315 Acorn Lane, District 9. First, I want to thank all of you for your service and your contributions, and for voting your consciences. As a senior in college in the 1970s, my private school tuition was $1,500. It was an amount that any hardworking student could earn almost from summer work and from part-time work during the school year. Compare that to today. Compare that to today's higher education costs. Imagine a student earning that much in today's environment. Why did this occur? It occurred because college tuitions over the past 40 years have been allowed to grow at 2 to 3 times the rate of inflation. Society failed to hold colleges and universities accountable during that period for cost control. And society failed students and parents that have had to bear inexcusable and unnecessary costs and debt loads that have totally changed our society. Does this sound familiar? It should sound familiar to us, because after 17 years, when spending and taxes have increased at 2 to 3 times the rate of inflation, we've reached a tipping point in Fairfield. During a time when incomes and property values have not kept up with spending and taxes, and average take-home pay is down, Fairfield taxes are up by 30%. Please keep Fairfield affordable. If we don't treat spending as the elephant in the room, we'll wind up hurting everyone in the long run. In the short term even, we'll see the value of our houses erode and tax redistribution to those who can least afford it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle Matola, 21 Surrey Lane of District 2. I've been a Republican voter in District 2 for 15 years now. I spent the early part of my career fighting tax increases and unnecessary mandates as a lobbyist in Washington. I completely support the budget as is with no cuts, and here's why. I'm all for finding some efficiencies in our spending. Our boards have looked at this for months. They've cut what they felt they can cut. I'm all for cutting unnecessary unfunded mandates, but we're not going to do that before our education budget is set in the next couple of weeks. And if any of you think that a $500,000 cut is something that can be easily absorbed, I don't think that you were at the January Board of Ed meetings when our Board of Ed, Republicans and Democrats included, struggled over how could we find the $350,000 to restore the world language program cuts that we lost. How could we find the $50,000 to restore the cuts to our music programs? And that's not extracurricular. Those are curricular programs. How could we find the money to replace the user fees that we've imposed on our students for the past couple of years? And the other point I want to make is I don't know if you've been in our schools to see technology in use. My freshman he's required to do all of his Spanish homework using an app on his iPhone. My fourth grader has had to go to the computer lab every single week to practice for SBAC testing, all of which is done on computers and graded on computers in our
Thank
schools.
you.
We can't sustain these cuts.
Hi, good evening. Kristen Tharrington, 79 Walden Court, that's District 9. I agree with the sentiment that being fiscally responsible and supporting this budget are not mutually exclusive. In fact, I would assert that supporting this budget is a start to preserving the financial health of our town and our largest asset. Homebuyers are provided with resources that we could have only dreamed of years ago when looking to move. I fear that they will notice that we are at a tipping point, albeit a different tipping point than was described previously tonight. The question is going to morph from why must education supporters in this town lobby for the status quo year after year? It's going to morph into why is Fairfield not investing in its schools? Why are we not investing in our children? I feel that we are at the point where we're risking our reputation as a town that values education and values investment in education. And I urge you to support the budget as originally presented tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Neil Fink, 70 Crest Terrace. I'm here tonight speaking for myself and for the Fairfield PTA Council as their president. My first point is that I know a lot of people have tried to make the distinction about this $500,000 being a reduction to an increase. While that technically may be true, when you consider that this budget, as presented by the Board of Ed, is actually just a move forward budget. There's no new programs in there, there's no new staff in there. It's just to maintain what we have today and increase it by the mandated increased costs, most of which this body actually approved in the form of contracts. So the $500,000 really is a cut because that money has to come from someplace, and it's going to be from a program. Earlier this evening, we had about 125 supporters of education, along with many children, in a rally that we did outside. And it was a really powerful thing, and it really reminded me, and I hope it reminds all of you, that the sleeping giant has awoken, and the parents have sprung to action. And while the voter turnout in the last election was pretty abysmal, I can assure you that the parent group is motivated and organized and will continue to be so come next election time. Some of the people at that rally heard me earlier talk about this wonderful performance of The Wizard of Oz at Ludlow High School last weekend, and watching the story of the Cowardly Lion reminded me of many members of this RTM. And I know we're not supposed to get personal, but I want to commend Representative Steele for having the courage to stand up against the party that is pushing for specific cuts and bullying their members. Thank you.
John Convertito, District 10, Republican Board of Education. Where's my party gone? Over the last 10 weeks, I've not heard one word from any of you regarding the Board of Education budget. I've not been asked for input. I've not been invited to a caucus. I've not received a single email. Why? I'll tell you why. Because I support this budget in its entirety. And if you're a Republican that supports this budget in its entirety, you're persona non grata. Where has my party gone? My party left the building a long time ago, leaving it to ideologues who care only about their personal interest, not this town. You have been backed into a corner. None of you have had the courage to speak your mind. You have allowed party ideologues to handle the budget as if they were our parents handing out an allowance to a 13-year-old. No deference has been paid to the other elected officials in this town who have scoured over the budget these past 2 months. No respect paid to their opinion, no logic involved in the arguments. Just a simple line in the sand, CPI. And it's a dangerous line. If CPI goes to 4.5% next year, will you all happily endorse a budget that increases 4.5% to 5%? I think not. Where has my party gone? I understand promises were made last November, but none of you have proposed a single roadmap to detail how to get there. No committee formed, not one meeting to discuss a plan forward, no legislation action to promote commercial development, just words. Where has my party gone? I know you're out there. I urge you to have the courage to stand up tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Convertito.
Hello, I'm Jana Funaro, District 10. And first of all, I want to say thank you so much to everybody here for your service and for your time and for all that hard work that comes with this. And I do support the education budget as is, because I do trust our Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, and I encourage you to do so. It was a bipartisan support. And I think people here in this auditorium is also telling you this has to be a bipartisan support. Our town is one community, and we're so very tired and very disappointed by all these political games. And we're looking for leaders in both parties. And I thank you, some of you, I don't want to say certain names here, but thank you for stepping up and for leading our town and for being moderate and for being reasonable and for supporting this budget as is. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Steve Baker, 22 Charles Street. My wife and I both graduated from Roger Ludlow High School. Our parents both live in town. My stepmother lives in her home by herself, and she works 2 jobs to stay into that home. She's a very active person. She works in a child care place and at daycare and also tutors. She wrote to you in support of the education budget. My in-laws lived in a home in Fairfield. They now downsized to a condo because that's what you do when you don't need such a big a house anymore, when you only have 2 people. And they wrote to you in support of the education budget. I want them to stay in town. They save me a lot more in babysitting than you will in my taxes, that's for sure. But I really, they wrote to you in support of this budget because they know not only what it gave to their children and their grandchildren coming up, but also what it's going to keep their home values up when they finally do decide to sell. They need you to support this education budget for their retirement. So please, show the same courage Mr. Steele did, and don't support this reduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Kelly Dunn, can you hear that? Kelly Dunn, 205 Tuckle Lane, District 8. First, I wanted to say thank you to all who shared their varied opinions tonight on the budget. It was enlightening to hear a number of members of both parties stand up and actually share their thoughts behind their decisions, or at least their opinions on the budget. One quick point of clarification: one of the members mentioned mandates. It sounded from her discussion that she thought they were coming from Fairfield Public Schools, the PTAs, or somehow something like that. It's the state of Connecticut. Those mandates are from the state, and they're unfunded. So they're forced upon us, and you can ask Dr. Title for clarification, but that is the case. Please support this budget as presented. Please do not support this motion to cut $500,000. Thank you.
John Wynn, District 1. I'd like to speak strongly in favor of reducing the Board of Education budget by the planned $500,000 so that the budget increase does not exceed the rate of inflation. My wife and I have lived in Fairfield in excess of 25 years. In the past 10 years, unfortunately, our taxes have skyrocketed. Our desire is to retire here, yet the taxes have made that questionable. It is entirely unfair to expect the taxpayers to bear the burden of these taxes. Constant increases are not supportable. The rising taxes are just driving away the property owners to more affordable and more fiscally well-managed towns. The budget must be streamlined to the essentials. From reading platform statements in this past election, you'd think this budget debate would not be necessary. Please remember the statements the RTM members made about keeping Fairfield affordable. Anything greater than the inflation rate is not affordable and will continue us down the road towards a town where no one wants to nor can afford to live. This really isn't an argument anymore, it's just the facts. Please take the steps to reduce the Board of Education budget by the identified $500,000.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Hopf. I'm in District 2. If somebody had a goal of increasing citizen participation, I think they did a great job. I want to say that I do understand and I do believe that the members of the RTM, all of them are patriots. I think they all care a lot about Fairfield. I think that when they ran on a platform to reduce taxes or keep them at least level, they probably feel an obligation to their constituents to adhere to that, and I understand that. I think that those of us who wish that we could keep our budget the way it is are paying for the fact that we did not participate much in the last election. But I will say that to the folks in the RTM, because I think we all think that it's going a certain way. I think that you should understand that as the gentleman before me said, we've awoken a sleeping giant. It reminds me of back in the days of Richard Nixon when he brought up the silent majority and then suddenly it became a major factor in politics, and I think that that's where we're headed. So I would ask you just from a political point of view to bear that in mind, please. And that's my thing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Adam Kaur. I live at 235 Primrose Lane. I'd like to thank you for your service to the town. We really appreciate it. We know that you do this on top of all the time you spend in your professional lives and your personal lives with your families. I don't need the entire 90 seconds. I just want to remind you that throughout this country, from district to district, state to state, it has always, always remained true that education cuts, or even the perception of education cuts, have lowered home values. Always. Please be responsible and keep the education budget as it is and do not make cuts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road, District 3. The past couple times I've spoken to you, I've let my emotions get the better of me. I'm going to try not to let that happen today. I want so many things that I can say, and I don't even know where to begin, so I'm going to start by saying thank you because I appreciate that I did not say that the last two times I spoke. I thank you for your service. I do not envy the very tough decision you have before you. I cannot support this motion. I do appreciate that it is a reduction to a proposed increase, but I've been sitting at Board of Ed meetings for countless years, and it's really a reduction to a proposed increase of a budget that has been cut year after year. I've seen our educational system slowly eroding, and I fear the day when we all wake up and we see the giant hole that we have left there. Because we're not talking about all the things that have been cut. You know, we're increasing the prior year, but so many things are gone. And we are nationally, most of our high schools are nationally listed, but we're not recognized for being a STEM school. Neither high school has STEM programming because there's not money to really invest in that. We're talking about cutting technology. Again, I can't even, maybe the fourth year in a row, PTAs, thank God, because without us, there probably wouldn't be smart boards in half the classrooms in this town. You know, I'm getting emotional again. There you go. Passionate. I just can't help it. I just see us going down a really bad road.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Carolyn Trabucco, 221 Sherwood Farm Road. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for reading my emails, for referring to some of the things I've included in my emails. I promise I'm not going to bring up any more statistics or charts or no more data. $500,000 is the proposal that's before you. I can tell you from my knowledge of the budget book that that type of a cut on top of what's already been submitted and passed through, that cut will be visible, it will be tangible, we will feel it. And I hope that you think about that. I think you can do better than that, guys. I do believe that there is ground for you to manage. I think 500,000 could backfire. I just think it's too much. So I hope that you will defeat, that motion is defeated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lenore Campbell, 72 Newman Place, District 6. I'm a parent of two boys, a senior and a sophomore in the school system. Been very involved in PTA, have been in your shoes the last 2 years. First want to thank you again for your service. The voices, the passionate voices have spoken here today, even amongst all of you. Please listen to your constituents. The budget needs to stay intact. Make the right and responsible decision, and truly consider all that is at stake. I urge you to support the budget as is, and do not support this Board of Education budget cut.
Thank you.
Hi, Melissa Rosenblue at 51 Greenbrier Road. My entire family has grown up here. My father graduated from Andrew Ward. He's 70 years old. His parents grew up here. I have a child. We've all been a product of the school system, and we have seen it slowly dwindling down. It used to be considered excellent. Now it's good. I'd like to see it get better, yet again. I'm also a single parent who struggles to pay the taxes, but I will come up with the money that I need to do, like I do every year. My parents are seniors, and they're on fixed income. They have problems with the taxes, but my mother is here as well, supporting the budget, as is. It's extremely important for our town to have this, as well as everything else that we give in this town, and to improve upon it. They cannot do more with less. They cannot maintain status quo with less. And that is exactly what this town body is asking them to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, before the next speaker gets to the microphone, the line continues to grow. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this reduction so that we can move forward with a full amount of business we still need to do tonight? If you are going to speak, I ask that you get in line now, and after this, no more additions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Steve Elworthy, 148 Catherine Street. Over the last 13 years, I can tell you I have not seen one Board of Education budget cut. Emphasis, this is a reduction of the increase. Every year, it's a reduction of the increase. I want to thank you all for your service. I've sat in these seats. I want to thank also the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the RTM, because I know how hard you all work each and every year. But I wanted to remind you that last November, you were all elected. Thousands of people came out to vote for you. Though it may seem like it, they're not all here. I've been living in this town for over 40 years. And I can tell you I have many friends who would like to be here, but they're traveling, working, taking care of their kids, unable to be here. So I promised them I'd come and speak and say, please, do what you can, the best you can, to keep from increasing our taxes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mary Hogue, District 3. I wanted to point out that every year our school population grows. We're one of the few school districts that have to expand because we are increasing our enrollment. So therefore, we do have a per pupil cost that needs to be addressed. If we keep cutting and keep cutting, we are cutting into what is the basics for the kids. There are mandates that we keep getting. We hear about the SBACs and all the technology. They have to have it. There's no way around it. We are legally required to do all sorts of things that we don't have control over tonight or from this town. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do something about it some other time. We missed the chance for this budget. We are faced with the fact that we are stuck between these two places, and you can't take away the ability to give the good education that we need to have for our students and that we need to have as an educational system in order to keep the home values that are so important to everybody in our town. So I really urge you to keep the education budget as is for everybody in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deb Owens. I reside in District 10. I see a lot of familiar faces out there, friends and former RTM colleagues. As a former RTM member, I completely understand the frustration that comes at this time of year. You are given two choices, to either pass the budget as it is or cut it. You can't tell them what to cut. You can't add anything to the budget. You really have those two choices. And sometimes it feels like you just want to do something, and you want to say something, and you want to prove a point, and you want to show that you're fiscally conservative. And I am a Republican myself, and I completely agree that we need to be fiscally responsible. But the good news is that our bipartisan Board of Finance has already thoroughly looked at this budget and has determined that it is what we need this year. They've done a great job, and I think you should respect the work they've done. So please, don't make cuts just to prove a point. Don't give in to party pressure. You're not here to represent your party. You're here to represent us. So please vote no to this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Havey, and I still live in District 10 on Longview Avenue. I am a soccer mom. I am a homeowner. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a rugby mom. I'm a band mom. And I feel like I am single-handedly supporting the supermarkets here in town with my two teenage boys. I have a senior and a freshman in the high schools. Doesn't matter which one because they're great. What matters is you younger kids, parents of younger kids, you're not getting the same education my kids got. Not close. We've seen things happen over the years that kind of quietly slip by, and now with this $500,000 cut you're looking at, it's going to roll over into next year. Next year's already looking at making up $1 million worth of efficiencies. We want to change the class schedules in the high schools for more efficiencies. There's a lot of things that need to be done. Too much deferring, there's nothing left in the stone. The blood's all gone. This is a vibrant town, and any further cuts to this budget in the education or into the town, it will further degrade our what we value, what's important to us, why we stay, why we're soccer moms, why we're rugby moms, and why we're taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Ask you to please hold your applause. Thank you.
Jennifer Maxon, Kennelly, 117 Edgewood Place. These past several years more than represent the Board of Ed sharing in the burden of expenditure reduction. For the percent of our town that represents parents and the ignored vital statistic of the parents of preschoolers, the parent of a child soon to be but not yet enrolled in our schools, I promise you that the cut you decide to support today will represent a weakened school district for your child in years to come and for hundreds of other parents as well. It represents a cut, further plummeting Fairfield in the ranks of towns who demonstrate tangible support of education. We are already 62nd in the state, a number that shouts from the rooftops that Fairfield does not support education. We keep hearing the argument about affordability, but as has been clearly demonstrated, that is a highly flawed and manipulated perspective. But why do you trust some abstract data point more than the hundreds of Fairfield citizens, parents and non-parents and senior citizens who have indicated their desire and willingness to pay, as well as the Board of Finance, who explicitly examined affordability and determined that this budget achieved that? The Republican caucus has determined that the number 500,000 will reasonably address those constituents demanding that they cut the budget and that it won't do that much damage to the town's educational service. Be clear, you're wrong. It will directly impact the education that this town is able to offer. The Board of Ed already is having to find a painful $500,000 to cut. What is called for here is simply courage. You may have agreed as a group, but you'll stand individually at the time of roll call.
Thank you. I ask that you please respect my wishes and hold your applause. Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Ken Lee, 71 Rhode Avenue, District 10. Just for the record, last November, less than 30% of the people in this town eligible to vote voted. Can't hear me? I got to get smaller. I find it difficult to call that a mandate. This year is a little unusual because I believe that the vast majority of you received a lot more input supporting the budget than against the budget, unlike the previous 4 years. The budget before you for the Board of Education, call it what you like, is what the Board of Education has determined it takes to run the educational system this year. You can phrase it any way you want, but that's what it really is. School systems are a very important metric for homebuyers, just like town services. The question is risk versus reward. The reward is that the 89% of the people in the town whose assessment is $750,000 or less will save $33 or less on their $18,000 tax. The risk is that people will find that out. Our school system begins to erode, as it already is. Our home values go with it, and ultimately Fairfield is no longer a place where people want to come to live. So the question you really have to ask yourself is, does that sound like a reasonable risk?
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Teresa Ross, District 1. Thank you to all the members of the RTM for all of your time and effort. I support the education cut. I think that it is time to give the RTM line item purview of budget items so that we can avoid these painful intersections of our townspeople. It is not in the town's long-term interest to increase the education spending, or indeed any spending, above the CPI. Increases cannot be sustained. We have to stop thinking short-term and what we would like to be able to do and think long-term for the long-term viability of our wonderful town of Fairfield.
Thank you.
Good evening. Mike Kutch, District 9, 1024 Umpqua Road. You guys are holding up amazingly well. I'm sorry. You guys are holding up amazingly well. District 9. I'm a new resident. District 9. We just moved here in August. Let me be clear. I do not support the amendment. I would like to see the original bipartisan supported budget succeed. I moved here last August from Rye, New York, and it's interesting to me that the taxes collected on my property are double now than the taxes that were paid from the person that previously owned the property. It was a renovated house. Tax revenues are going up because of that. All the revitalization in the beach properties. But that can only last so long. The reason that I was willing to pay an exorbitant price for my house is because my kids can walk to a top-rated school. My wife and I wouldn't consider moving any place where there wasn't a 10 rated school that we could live near. I have degrees in accounting, finance. I understand fiscal responsibility. My concern is that we're making a decision here that has long-term dire economic impacts. Please think about Fairfield you want to be in long-term. Don't just focus on today. Don't cut the school taxes, the school budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Rupert, 180 Warwick Avenue. I am opposed to this budget cut or reduction. For full disclosure, my wife is an educator here in Fairfield and works very hard. For further disclosure, I have been out of work for more than a year. I support this budget in its entirety, and I hear from friends around the state all the time how wise we were to come here to Fairfield all those years ago, before my son and daughter were born, and when we also supported the education budget at that time. I'm not really sure. The budget was not a secret budget, and why there was no types of proposals given in terms of what could be specifically cut and then thrown back for Dr. Title to come up with those cuts, I think is a little bit questionable. And then just for a limited sample, I do have a neighbor who has decided to downsize, an elderly neighbor decided to downsize, has remained in Fairfield, moved to someplace in Fairfield, remained in Fairfield, and a home, her home was sold at a premium and is now going to be occupied by a young family with small kids who will be entering the school system because that's where they wanted to be, in Fairfield.
Time. Thank you.
Gina Lujay, District 3, Sherwood Farm Road. I wasn't going to speak tonight. I was sitting in back. I've spoken a lot in the past few months, and I was sitting there saying, why am I here? And the reason I'm here is because last year, at this time, after the reductions to the proposed budget were made and the parents were shown what was on the table, people said, how did this happen? The PTAs, the schools were told that the parents didn't speak up. I'm sitting there and watching all of the parents come up and hoping that we don't hear that again next year. I have supported this budget since it was approved by the Board of Ed back in January. I've been advocating for my kids in our schools for a long time now. I can't vote tonight. After tonight, if you decide that the education budget can absorb more cuts, I'm going to have to go back to my community and tell them again what's on the table. I will be asked to choose between a program, a service, maintenance technology, or whether or not my child has a support system in place so that they can do their jobs. I've heard a lot of you guys say that the buck stops here, but I had a lot of ayes in that statement, and I feel like it's coming right back to us, and the parents are going to have to do a lot more work. I feel like we already have.
Thank you.
Ann Harvey, Hemlock Road, District 2. Like the previous speaker, I was not planning on speaking tonight. Can you hear me? The audio is a little tough. Sorry? Speak closer. Okay. Maybe because of budget cuts, we don't have a great audio system, but I should make light because I know the job you have is terrible. This is not fun for anyone. I oppose this reduction, quite obviously. The vast majority of your constituents do as well. And I just want to reiterate that point because I've heard from several of your members that it's a barbell with sort of, an even amount of emails and opinions from both sides of the spectrum has been taking place. But I can venture to guess that that's not the case, that the vast majority of your constituents support the budget as passed by the Board of Finance, a body which I find to be extremely reasonable and intelligent, and not only in how they thought through this whole process, but in their conduct. And it's conduct which I would ask that the RTM and especially the Board of Ed consider emulating. We are at risk of alienating the parents who are engaged, and that is really sad. I think a lot of the parents here tonight are very disheartened, and we don't want to turn our parents off our families off in a democracy. I am not interested in hearing analyses performed by lay people who have identified efficiencies in Dr. Title's budget. I'm really not interested. I'm interested in hearing what the Board of Finance and Dr. Title, say in their professional judgment. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have two final speakers.
Should I blow on the mic? Can everybody hear me?
No.
Don't blow on the mic. Good evening. My name is Brian Gates. I live on Gay Bowers Road. I believe I spoke last week to this same group. Can you hear me? Wow. How about now? Can you hear me? All right. Can I start over on my time?
Excuse me. I asked for all speakers who were going to speak to the budget to stand up, and we have two additional speakers now in line. Mr. Ferentz, would you start the time? Thank you.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I spoke last week. We all want the same thing. We all want our children to have a great education in a nice town. I think the source of our disagreement is we have a differing view as to how effective and efficient we're being with the money that's being spent. I'm not an expert, but I have spent coming up on 40 hours trying to decode this education budget, and I see opportunities. I could be wrong, but that's the source of our disagreement. Let's not ascribe negative intent to people. That's what I would ask of our community. Everyone is well-spirited, otherwise we wouldn't be here at 10 o'clock at night talking about our education system. Let's all acknowledge that. To me, on the surface, we have one teacher for every 12 children, and we have 25 children in a classroom. That feels inefficient to me. Just on the surface, I look at that and go, that seems like too many teachers or too big of a class, or something isn't right when you have 12 to 1 and you end up with 25 in a class. I also think 570 people on our payroll who don't teach seems disproportionate to me. Labor is our problem. Labor cost. We had a discussion about the supervisor or administrator of custodial services. I highlighted that because a supervisor of custodial services makes $59,000 a year.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Please proceed.
Jessica Gerber, 25 Shady Hill Road. I'm a taxpayer, I'm a homeowner, I'm a parent and a Board of Ed member. I actually liked this budget $804,000 ago, but I understand that that's not what's before you tonight. I ask that you please approve the Town and Board of Ed budgets as they are before you, as approved by both Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. I know that many of you sitting at these tables tonight disagree with me, and I would respectfully ask that if you do believe cuts can and should be made, that these cuts will not impact students and programs, please be specific. Show us how this is possible. I have been looking at this budget since January and I don't see it, but I'd like to hear from you. And please do not simply say there is fluff or fat or overhead or not enough efficiencies or too many administrators. Provide some detail to back up your position. We all understand that at the end of the day, the Board of Ed will be the ones to cut the actual reductions to the budget. But please show us how cuts can be made without negatively impacting our students, schools, and town. There's so much talk of transparency and accountability on some of our town boards. I can think of no better way for the RTM members to be transparent than to state specifically how they can find cuts that will total up to the amount of their proposed reduction. I can think of no better way for RTM members to hold themselves accountable than to own their cuts by stating where specifically these cuts could and should be made. Again, my hope is that you will approve this budget as is, but realistically, I know the odds of that happening are slim, so I ask that you please be accountable for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I asked, and you weren't in line, so we do have some business we have to take care of. Mr. Hurley, would you go to the microphone? Mr. Hurley.
Michael Hurley, District 1. I'd like to make a motion to suspend Rule 36 of the RTM Rules to Regulate so that we can take up new business after 11 p.m.
Thank you. Second by Representative Marbian. Yes.
I want you to clarify what that means.
Okay.
It's very important. This is voted down. What that means.
Okay. I've been asked to clarify what it means to suspend the rules. And I'm going to tell you that according to the rules to regulate by the RTM, we cannot take up new business after 11 o'clock. Or go past 11:30. Thank you, Mr. Representative Steele. Thank you. This means that we must, I'm sorry. We must take a vote. We have a motion. We have a second. 2/3 vote. Would you call the roll?
John Donovan?
Yes.
Michael Hurley?
Yes.
Jay Lipp?
Yes.
Gaylord Meyer?
Yes.
Eric Sonderman?
Yes.
Pete Ambrose?
Yes.
Kevin Burstein? Yes. Daniel Schindler?
Yes.
Jeff Steele?
Yes.
Keith Varian?
Yes.
Ed Bateson?
Yes.
Laura Devlin? Yes. Hank Behrens?
Yes.
Dave McKenzie?
Yes.
Mary McCullough?
Yes.
Heather Dean? Yes. Joe DiMartino?
Yes.
Bill Gerber?
Yes.
Joe Palmer?
Yes.
Cindy Waldron? Yes. Josh Garskoff?
Yes.
Lauren O'Brien?
Yes.
Andrew Semmel?
Yes.
Ruth Smag?
Yes.
Carol Way?
Yes.
Julie Gottlieb?
Yes.
Alan Marks?
Yes.
Sheila Marmion?
Yes.
Jay Walk?
Yes.
Liz Ezema? Yes. Jen Hopper? Yes. Kevin Hopkins?
Yes.
Eric Newman?
No.
Phil Pierce?
Yes.
Hal Schwartz?
No.
Kathy Braun? Yes. Alex Durrell?
Yes.
Jason Lee?
Yes.
Tom McCarthy?
Yes.
Jeff Noronha?
Yes.
Pamela Iacono? Yes. Ellen Jacob? Yes. Roy McCardle? Yes. Carol Pontrelli? Yes. Brian Caparelli?
Yes.
Brian Farnan?
Yes.
What was that, Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Ray Newberger?
Yes.
Bill Perugini?
Yes.
Bruce Ryan?
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you. Now, back to the motion on the floor, which is a reduction of $500,000 to the Board of Education budget. Certainly. 47 to 2. Are you all ready to vote? Are there any further comments from the body before we go to vote? Representative Marks.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Alan Marks, District 6. I have a few points to make. So far, well, we just heard the public, and I made a note that what we heard tonight from the public was about 6 or 7 to 1 in favor of the budget, which I think is meaningful. We've heard this budget called unaffordable. It is my belief that the cut is actually unaffordable to the system because of the pain it will cause. We've also heard that the proposed cut to the ed budget is about $25 a household per year. It'll actually be much less or less for many of the houses because they're below the average household price. But these kinds of cuts, $500,000 here, $800,000 there, they tend to add up. And they have a significant impact on what goes on with the educational system. We received a lot of emails from people. I read as many as I could, but one of them stood out. Many of them stood out, but one in particular. We received an email from someone who mentioned that she has a high school senior right now, and she also has younger children in elementary school, and that parent noted that the education her children currently in the elementary school system is not as good as the education her high school senior got. The cuts the small cuts that we have made over time are having an impact, a noticeable impact to those parents who have seen those changes. We had a rep come up earlier who talked about coming to the middle, that this being a compromise. It is my opinion that this budget, as proposed, is already a compromise. The Board of Selectmen made a cut, and the Board of Finance, which is Republican-controlled, endorsed it as it was. So I believe that this budget is already a compromise. As I said, I think that the $25 is not an amount that we should cut to risk the effect that this is going to have. We've also heard tonight a lot of people from both parties get up and commend Dr. Title on his ability to juggle with these cuts to somehow make it all work out. And I fear that if we make this cut, Dr. Title will be juggling with air and will really have nothing to work with. So I oppose this cut. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further members by Representative Iacono?
Pamela, can you hear me? Pamela Iacono, District 9. This is Groundhog Day for so many of us who've been here for so long, where we stand up and have the same discussion year after year after year, and we've heard many speakers talk to us about when are we going to finally do something about moving the needle on our long-term liabilities. And I'm prepared to do that this evening and make some very tough choices about what has to happen with this budget to have that impact. And in order for me to do that, I have to examine both sides of the ledger, and because of that, I am considering this cut to the Board of Education. It does not make me happy. It's not the number that I wanted. It's not really the number where I think we should be going. But in an effort to move the needle to where I think we need to go as a town, I will support this reduction. I know that's disappointing because I spent 5 years on the Board of Education and people want me to own up to where I am. I will own up to it. This will affect programming. I have 3 children in the public school system. For those people who stood up and said that their education, I have a 8th grader, a 5th grader, and a 2nd grader. And for those people who stood up and said that my 2nd grader is getting less of an education that my 8th grader is getting, I'm sorry, but I beg to differ. My 2nd grader is getting an unbelievable education. And what I see in what he's getting in the curriculum changes that came from curriculum leaders, instructional improvement teachers, engaged administrators, and teachers who have a great deal of professional development, all changes that happened under Dr. Title. And I am impressed with what my 2nd grader can do. And there is tons of work that can be done with my 8th grader, who had a curriculum that was put forth by a different superintendent. So it pains me to have to do this and to reduce a budget where I know it will affect programming. But when administrators stand in front of the Board of Education and they beg them not to add back a 45-minute music class when 5th graders already have music 2 times a week, and this will be a 3rd because it will interfere with instructional time and prep time, that's very frustrating to me. Because I have a 5th grader right now who is benefiting big time from the planning and the things that are going on with those teachers, and I voted to reduce that music class. It didn't make me happy, but now those administrators and those teachers have seen the difference of what it's made for the 5th graders that are currently seeing that. And I'm disappointed that my 2nd grader won't see that. And he didn't lose music. He's still going to have an opportunity to do it 2 days a week. And if he wants, he could do strings. And if he wants,
he can play an instrument. And if he wants, he can sing in the chorus. So he still is music. So that, to me, is frustrating. I want us to focus on the whole child. And I think that we can do that if we really start to move the needle on our long-term liabilities. Because there's going to come a day, and that day is coming right around the corner. I've said it to people before, where we are going to have to fund education to its fullest. Don't fool yourself, or you will be hurting this town. So I own my cut. I know the impact it's going to have. I have children that will be affected by it. But I also know that if we don't get our long-term liabilities under control, I am not going to be able to give my second grader the education that I want him to have.
Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 4. I can speak from experience with regarding what my children have experienced. My two sons came through the Fairfield Public School System, and I'm very proud of that fact, and they both got to enjoy Nature's Classroom. Now, many of you don't really think that that's a big deal, but it was a big deal in their life. In fact, they were very excited to share their experience with my daughter, who's now in 8th grade, when she went to Nature's Classroom. But lo and behold, it was canceled. It was stopped because of budget cuts. She didn't get to enjoy that. She didn't get to have that experience. Today, we got to look at her picture of her 8th grade trip to D.C. to go see our nation's capital, to learn about our history, and it was wonderful. It's a fabulous picture. And you know what? Her class is the last class that's going to enjoy it because it's been cut. So my children have been disappointed. They were not able to, my daughter was not able to fully appreciate Nature's Classroom. And now other children, the children of the supermajority in this room, the parents, their children who are going into 8th grade will not be able to enjoy the DC trip either. Thank you.
Representative Iacono.
It's late. I know we all want to vote, but I just want to correct that statement because I've heard it repeatedly in emails. Nature's Classroom was not cut during a budget cut. It was cut because people were missing instructional time. The DC program may or may not go away next year, not because of budget cuts, but because of changes with the administration's rules about instructional time and not being able to miss more than 2 days out of the classroom. That's why those two particular programs have either gone away or have been scaled back.
Representative DiMartino. There's a motion on the floor to call. Representative Smay is second. Go to a vote. Oh, I'm sorry, but the motion that's just been made by a member of the RTM stops all discussion by the members of the RTM, and we go to a vote after we vote on the motion. All right, to the clerk.
John Donovan? Yes. Michael Hurley? Yes. Jay Liff?
Yes.
Gaylord Meyer? Yes. Eric Sundman? Yes. Pete Ambrose?
No.
Catherine Gerstein? Yes. Nathan Schindler?
Yes.
Jeff Steele?
Yes.
Keith Varian?
Yes.
Ed Bateson?
Yes.
Laura Devlin? Yes. Hank Behrens?
Yes.
Dave McKenzie?
Yes.
Mary McCullough?
Yes.
Heather Dean? No. Joe DiMartino?
Yes.
Bill Gerber?
No.
Joe Palmer?
Yes.
Cindy Waldron? No. Josh Garskoff? No. Kathy Braun? Yes. Alex Durrell?
No.
Jason Lee?
No.
Tom McCarthy?
Yes.
Jeff Lorano?
Yes.
Pamela Iacono? Yes. Ellen Jacob?
Yes.
Lori McCardle?
Yes.
Carol Pontrelli?
Yes.
Brian Caparelli?
Yes.
Brian Farnan?
Yes.
Ray Newberger?
Yes.
Bill Perigini?
Yes.
Bruce Ryan?
Yes. Two representatives didn't understand the vote.
The vote has not been announced. Would those two representatives please identify themselves? Representative Durrell? Representative Lee? The vote is to call the question, which means all conversation on the motion on the motion before us, which is the $500,000 reduction, we stop discussing and we go directly to a vote. This must pass by a 2/3 majority. Representative Lee? Representative Durrell? Yes? Is that what you said? The motion passes 34 to 15. Okay, we're going to go to the main motion on the floor, which is the reduction of $500,000 to the Board of Education budget. Are all members ready to vote? Again, we are voting on a reduction of $500,000 to the Board of Education budget.
John Donovan?
Yes.
Michael Hurley?
Yes.
Jay Lipp?
Yes.
Gaylord Meyer?
Yes.
Eric Sundman?
Yes.
Pete Ambrose?
Yes.
Catherine Burstein?
Yes.
Nathaniel Schindler?
Yes.
Jeff Steele?
No.
Keith Varian?
No.
Ed Bateson?
Yes.
Laura Devlin?
Yes.
Hank Ferentz?
Yes.
Dave McKenzie?
Yes.
Mary McCullough?
No.
Heather Dean?
No.
Joe DiMartino?
Yes.
Bill Gerber?
No.
Joe Palmer?
Yes.
Cindy Waldron?
No.
Josh Garsbaugh?
No.
Lauren O'Brien?
Yes.
Andrew Semmel?
No.
Ruth Smeg?
No.
Carol Way?
Yes.
Julie Gottlieb?
No.
Alan Marks?
No.
Sheila Marmion?
No.
Jay Wall?
No.
Liz Ezema?
No.
Jen Hochberg?
No.
Kevin Hopkins?
No.
Eric Newman?
No.
Bill Pierce?
No.
Al Schwartz?
No.
Kathy Braun?
Yes.
Alex Durrell?
No.
Jason Lee?
No.
Tom McCarthy?
Yes.
Jeff Lorano?
Yes.
Pamela Iacono? Ellen Jacob?
Yes.
Lori McCardle?
Yes.
Carol Pontrelli?
Yes.
Brian Caparelli?
Yes.
Brian Farnan?
No.
Ray Newberger?
Yes.
Bill Perigini?
Yes.
Bruce Ryan?
Yes.
Twenty-seven, 22.
The motion passes 27 to 22. Any further motions? Would you like to take a 5-minute break? I'm going to ask that all the members have the opportunity to take a 5-minute break. You've been sitting here for over 3 hours. I think you all deserve a little break. Are there any other motions to discuss? Representative Devlin.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Laura Devlin, District 3. In a desire to lower the tax burden on Fairfield residents, we have to look everywhere for opportunities to reduce our spending. And with that, I'm going to make a motion regarding the library. First, I want to say I am a regular user of our library, and I do not make this motion lightly. In addition to hard copy books, I use the digital services, including databases. I use the small meeting rooms. I've attended programs and meetings at both the main library and our Woods branch. I share this with you simply to reinforce my appreciation for the role that our libraries do play in our community. Still, we are challenged to keep Fairfield affordable, and we need to consider all options for reducing our level of spending. Over the past few months, weeks, days, I've listened to the perspectives, recommendations, and comments from our citizens regarding the budget in areas that they feel strongly about. One of those was the teen librarian. Elimination would have helped reduce our long-term liabilities and saved approximately $130,000 in salary, in medical, in pension, in insurance. It's clear, however, that the programming and support that is offered through the teen program is really very highly valued. So rather than move to eliminate or to reduce the teen librarian, instead, I'm recommending a reduction in library materials. It can be easy to talk about making reductions in a budget. It can be another thing when you recognize how those reductions may affect you personally. But that is not a reason to not make or support a choice. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions and compromise. With that, I'm making a motion to reduce our library materials budget, Department 7010, line item 56180, from $560,000 to $485,000, a reduction of $75,000. Thank you.
Seconded by Kathy Braun. Comments from members of the body? I'm sorry. Representative Newman? It was seconded, yes. I'm sorry. Representative Newman.
Eric Newman, District 7. My grandfather came through Ellis Island. He didn't know any English. He grew up in the Lower East Side. He learned English. He never traveled the world, but he went to the public libraries. His education was very minimal, but from the library he got an education. He never traveled the world, but he did travel the world. Opening the books, reading the books from his little boy to his final days. He always had library books, different materials out from the library. Materials were his lifeline to continue his education, a different type of education. For $70,000, what we're looking at, $5 per household to reduce this. People are struggling. Yeah, we hear about people are struggling, so they don't go out to the movies. They might take a DVD out. They might take a VCR tape out. These are important things to our community. You could download music. You don't have to buy the music. It's not worth, think common sense. Think of what our greater community needs. Everybody uses the library. Everybody uses materials. support me, go against this cut. Thank you.
Representative Gottlieb.
Julie Gottlieb, District 6. I have some numbers here I'd like to just read off. My understanding is that the first selectman has, in his budget, had already made a 7% cut to materials, taking them from 600,000 original request to 560, in addition to a 78% cut in capital outlay, which impacted the online catalog, which is the single most important library software. I would argue that they have done their part, if you will. Furthermore, if you look at the 560,000 that is currently out there as the requested library materials number, that is equivalent to 2003 funding levels. If you look at the new number that has just been suggested by Representative Devlin, that is equivalent to 1999 2000 funding levels. And that's with a 25% busier now in circulation and program attendance at the library. And furthermore, in 2000, the number we're looking at that was requested in the budget in 2014 is already down 10% from the previous year. I would ask through you, Ms. Moderator, if Mrs. Ronald or her representative could come and confirm that those numbers are correct, and furthermore, what the impact would be day to day on the citizens that use the library. And I have some further questions, but we'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Ronald. I'm your town librarian. I brought Jim Swift here today to talk a bit about the technology to confirm what's going on there. But I have to say I'm really almost devastated by the idea of this large cut. We would be turning back the book, so to speak, going back to 2000 funding years levels for library materials. Library materials go up every year. There's an inflationary cost. We've talked about that a bit. It's about 2 to 3% average for every item. We have a digital library. We did not have a digital library in 2000. These items cost as much as 3 to 4 times as much as a print counterpart. Our community is telling us they want them. They're going out. We have a teen services department. We've discussed this before. We didn't have teen services in 2000. It's a very popular area. These library materials cost money. We are going to have to, revisit the entire library materials budget, and you will not be able to, from day to day, get as many materials as you like or the kinds of materials you like. We actually try to buy for the entire community of 59,000 people. And we do a very good job. We're the second busiest library in Connecticut. Our branch remains the busiest branch. And one of the reasons is because we've had a very healthy library materials budget that is responding to the expectations of our community. If you decide to go back with this cut, it is going to significantly hurt our core business, which is still to provide library materials to our community. I did want to clarify about the technology too. Mr. Tetro and the Board of Finance agreed to option 2 for technology, so we are going to be able to upgrade our computer software, server, etc. We didn't get the third option we wanted, but we got the second one, which we're willing to live with, which will really help us provide better service to our community. So I wanted to clarify that. Any other questions? Going to do that?
Representative Marmion.